Picture a city where the king has just come back from the dead. Not literally, but close enough. 11 years of exile, of wandering the courts of Europe with empty pockets and a borrowed horse, of watching his father's head come off on a cold January morning outside the banqueting house, while the crowd made a sound he said he never forgot for the rest of his life. A sound like a single enormous exhale, as if England itself breathed out all at once. Then the Commonwealth, then the Protectorate, then the slow collapse of everything Cromwell built, and suddenly it's 1660, and the king is back, and the maypoles are going up, and the theatres are open and people are dancing in the streets. Add to that the particular smell of a city that has just been told God doesn't hate pleasure after all. Roast meat in the taverns, wine running freely, perfume applied with the enthusiasm of people who were told for a decade that perfume was suspicious. The Thames full of boats carrying silks and spices from every corner of the world. And underneath all of it, because this is London, the older smell, the permanent smell, the one that was there before Charles I lost his head, and will be there long after everyone who celebrated tonight is in the ground. Mud and river water and animal dung and human waste and the particular sharp sweetness of 10,000 fires, burning coal in 10,000 hearths. That's London. Restoration London. A city running on relief and excess and the desperate joy of people who weren't sure they'd ever be allowed to be happy again. We're going back there tonight, not as tourists, not as historians looking down at it from a safe distance. We're living it. One specific life, one specific woman, everything she would have seen and smelled and survived. I make these history stories, and honestly, I never quite know what draws people to this one. Maybe it's the idea of a woman with no title, no legal standing, no vote and no rights to speak of, who somehow ended up running the most powerful country in the world from a room she technically had no business being in. Maybe it's the Oranges. Maybe it's the Whigs. Either way, get comfortable. Here we go. The orange has been in your hand for 30 seconds, and already the juice is running down your wrist, sticky and cold, making your fingers slippery against the blade. You work faster. There are 40 oranges left in the crate and less than an hour until the curtain rises at the Theatre Royal, and if you haven't cleared your quota by the time the candles go up in the chandeliers, the basket goes back and your place with it. You've been doing this long enough to know that the blade needs to be sharp and the cuts need to be clean. A messy orange, one where you've hacked through it, and the peel hangs off in strips and the juice runs everywhere, doesn't sell. A clean orange, quartered halfway through and spread so the flesh shows bright and wet and fragrant, that sells. There's an art to it. Most of the girls don't bother to learn. You bothered to learn. The Theatre Royal smells, at this hour, like sawdust and tallow and the accumulated breath of several hundred people who haven't bathed since Sunday and are now pressed into a building that was designed to hold perhaps half that number comfortably. Comfortably is a generous word. The pit is standing room, bodies packed shoulder to shoulder around the stage, and in the summer the heat off all those bodies is something that has to be experienced to be believed. It's March right now, 1668, and the cold is still in the walls, seeping up from the floor, cutting through your skirt and your shift and making your toes ache inside your shoes. But cold is better than hot. Cold you can work in. Hot makes everything softer, makes the oranges drip before they're sold, makes the men in the pit restless and stupid. The Theatre Royal. You know every inch of it. The stage with its painted scenery that comes in from the sides on wooden frames, The machinery underneath that makes things rise from the floor or descend from the flies above. The tiring room behind where the actors crowd in together to change their costumes and argue about blocking and occasionally panic because someone's forgotten their lines again. You know the trap doors. You know which boards creak under your feet when you're trying to move quietly. You know that the candles in the third row of chandeliers burn faster than all the others because of a draft from a gap in the roof that nobody has gotten around to fixing in 6 years. You know the Theatre Royal the way you know your own hands, which is to say, completely, with all its flaws, and with a kind of love that doesn't require the thing to be perfect. The basket sits on the floor beside you, lined with a white cloth you wash every Monday. 40 oranges, each one cut and ready. Your hands smell of citrus, and there are small cuts on your fingers from the blade. Not enough to bleed seriously, but enough to sting when the juice gets in them. You learned to ignore the stinging years ago. Around you, the theatre is filling. The gallery above is already half full. The cheaper seats taken by the apprentices and the tradespeople, and the young men of modest income who come for the play but stay for the actresses and the noise, and the chance to shout things at people, more important than themselves. Below them, in the side boxes, the first of the quality are arriving. You can hear them before you see them. The rustle of silk, the click of heels on wood, the particular kind of laughter that means nothing except that the person doing it wants you to know they can afford to be here. Your mother would have said, "Those people aren't better than you." Your mother said a lot of things. Some of them were even true. You pick up the basket, settle it in the crook of your arm, and you begin to work. This is the part most people don't understand about selling oranges at the theatre. It's not just about the oranges. The orange is a coin. It's a price of admission to a conversation. Men buy them because it gives them a reason to call you over, a reason to look at you, a reason to talk to you that isn't completely shameless, even though everyone knows what it actually means. You sell the orange. You smile. You answer whatever they say with something quick enough to make them laugh. And then you move on. Because staying too long in one place means the basket doesn't empty. And the basket not emptying means tomorrow you don't have a basket. You've sold oranges since you were 14. You are 18 now. 4 years is a long time to learn the mechanics of a transaction that looks simple and isn't. The pit is filling. You step down into it, the basket on your arm, moving between bodies with the ease of someone who has done this in the dark, who has done this with 24 other orange girls around her, who could do this in her sleep. Oranges, you call, not a shout, a pitch. You found your pitch early, a particular note in your voice that carries without sounding like you're straining. Sweet oranges. The first sale goes quickly. A young man, probably a law student based on his clothes, with that particular look of someone trying to decide whether they can afford to be charming. You help him decide. You smile at the right moment. He buys 2 oranges and drops an extra penny in your palm and doesn't even look embarrassed about it. 4 years of this. You know every kind of man in London by now. You know the ones who are generous because they're showing off, and the ones who are generous because they're genuinely kind, and the ones who haggle over a halfpenny because they need to win something today. Anything, even an argument about fruit. You know the ones who look at you like you're the orange and the ones who actually, honestly want someone to talk to. You know the difference. The knowledge is useful. The knowledge is the thing that makes you better at this than the other girls. The ones who think selling oranges is about oranges. It was never about the oranges. You grew up in Covent Garden. Not the Covent Garden that people mean when they talk about finer dresses, the piazza with its market and its church, and the sense that money has chosen to live here. The other Covent Garden, the back streets behind the piazza, the courts and alleys where the buildings lean together overhead and the sun makes it down to street level for maybe 2 hours a day. The rooms above the taverns and the rooms below the rooms above the taverns and the particular quality of life that happens in all of that. Your mother kept a lodging house. This is a generous description. The lodging house was 3 rooms, 2 of which she let to single men, and 1 of which was yours and hers and sometimes someone else's depending on how the money was running. The house was on a court off Rose Street. Rose Street had nothing to do with roses. It was named probably for a person called Rose, or possibly for a tavern called the Rose, or possibly someone just felt optimistic one day. Whatever it was called, it smelled like the river and the tannery 2 streets over, and the particular sweetness of garbage that hasn't been collected since Tuesday. You don't remember being hungry. Or rather, you remember what hungry feels like in a way that tells you were hungry then, but you don't remember it as an event. It was a condition. Some days there was bread, and some days there was bread and a bit of something else, and some days the bread was stale and there was nothing else. And all of that was simply the texture of living there. The way the cold was the texture of living there, and the noise was the texture and the smell. Your mother drank. This is relevant, but it's not the whole story. She drank the way people drink when drinking is the cheapest way to make the present moment more bearable than it actually is, which in Covent Garden in the 1650s it frequently was. She drank gin, mostly. A penny for enough to soften the edges of things. A penny was not always a penny you had. But she also taught you to read. This is the thing about your mother that surprises people when you mention it, which you don't always mention it. She had been a barmaid who had at some point, before the part of her life you know about, been taught by a man who thought she was clever. She was clever. She passed it on to you with the practicality of someone passing on a tool they know is valuable. Here, this is useful. Learn to use it. You could read before you could sell oranges. That's not the usual order of things in Covent Garden. At 14, a woman named Madame Ross, who ran the orange concession at the Theatre Royal, took you on. You had applied yourself to this the way you applied yourself to reading, with the understanding that getting good at it was the only alternative to not getting good at it. You were good at it quickly. You had the voice, and you had the face, and you had the particular quality of attention that makes people feel like they matter, like their purchase of a penny orange is an event worth your genuine interest. Within 3 months, Madame Ross had noticed. Within 6 months, you were bringing in more than the other girls. Within a year, you'd been given the better section of the pit to work. Within 2 years, you'd started to appear on stage. Not as a lead, not at first. Bits, walk-ons, holding a prop at the side of a scene, then a few lines, then more lines, then a part that had lines in it and required you to learn them and say them out loud in front of several hundred people, which is a different kind of thing from selling oranges, even if the basic mechanics of making a room of strangers pay attention to you are the same. You are a quick study. You know your own lines before anyone else knows theirs. You're funny in the way that requires some intelligence behind it, not just the willingness to make faces. The audiences like you. The other actresses watch you with the particular wariness of people who know what competition looks like. But tonight you're not on stage. Tonight you're selling oranges because Mrs. Corey is doing Melanthra in Marriage a la Mode, and Mrs. Corey is the lead, and you are not yet the lead. And when you're not performing, you're selling because Madame Ross is a businesswoman who sees no reason to let her best girls stand around idle. So you're in the pit with the basket on your arm and the smell of citrus on your hands and the particular alertness in your body that this work gives you. The same alertness the stage gives you, actually, the knowledge that every person in this room is watching something, and you might as well make sure some of them are watching you. 2:30, the theatre fills to the edge of capacity, and then the king arrives, before the announcement. The way the quality in the boxes straightens up slightly, the way the noise in the pit doesn't exactly quiet but changes register, a shift in pitch like a musical instrument being tuned. Then the drum roll, and then the announcement, and then the audience is standing because you stand when the king comes in. It's one of those rules that nobody decided, it just is. Charles II takes the royal box with the easy movement of a man who has been watched his entire life and made peace with it. He's tall, 6 feet, and then some. Dark complexion, dark eyes, dark hair under his peruke. He's 40 years old now, and the life shows on him the way lives show on people who have lived them at full intensity. But he's still the most compelling person in any room he enters, and you suspect he knows it, and has long since decided that knowing it doesn't require you to do anything particular with the knowledge. He sits, the court settles around him, and then, because this is how these things happen, his eyes travel the pit. They land on you for half a second. You are already moving, because you know what you're doing, because standing still with your mouth open like a girl who's never seen a king before would be a waste of the moment, and the moment isn't wasted if it becomes a sale. You hold up an orange. You hear, years later, that he laughed, that the King of England laughed at an orange girl who looked up at him in his box and held up a piece of fruit like she was making a business proposition. This seems entirely likely. Charles II laughed frequently. He was known for it. He had a whole court of men whose job was essentially to be funny for him, and he took genuine pleasure in it. And the thing you figure out about him long before you understand what it means is that the pleasure is real. He is not performing delight. He actually delights. He bought the orange, which meant someone had to bring it up, and you were the one who brought it up. The royal box is separated from the pit by its elevation and by the men who stand outside its door. But getting an orange up to the King of England is not actually a complicated process if you are an orange girl who has been doing this for 4 years and who understands that the men at the door have no particular reason to stop you, because you are obviously just delivering what was just obviously purchased. So you go up, you knock. A page opens the door and looks at you with a particular expression of someone who has just realized he has no protocol for this situation. You smile at him. You hold up the orange. Inside the box, Charles turns in his chair. He looks at you the way you looked at him, with the full weight of his attention, which turns out to be considerable. Your Majesty bought an orange, you say. He did. He had. There is no argument available. Bring it in. You bring it in. The box is smaller than it looked from below. There are 8 or 9 people in it, courtiers and the like, men in coats that cost more than your mother's lodging house, and women in silk with their hair dressed high and gems at their throats. They all look at you with variations on the same expression. What is this? A girl with a basket of oranges who's walked into the king's box as if she belongs here. You hand him the orange. How much? He asks. You tell him the price. He raises an eyebrow. For 1 orange. The best orange in the theatre, Your Majesty, possibly in London. This is objectively a ridiculous thing to say. He knows it's ridiculous. You know he knows. The whole point is that you're both aware you're playing a game here and you're choosing to play it with some commitment. He takes a bite. He chews. He considers. Passable, he says. High praise from a man who's eaten oranges in Spain. He laughs. The court laughs with him, or mostly does, the ones who are quick enough. A woman in the back of the box doesn't laugh. She watches you with dark eyes that are measuring something very carefully. You notice this and file it away. Charles reaches into his coat and produces a coin that is significantly more than the price of the orange. He hands it to you without making a thing of it. Rich men do this. The gesture that says, I know the difference between what something costs and what I'm paying, and the difference is not kindness, it's theatre. You take the coin without making a thing of it either, because poor women do this. The gesture that says, I know what this is and I'm not going to embarrass either of us by pretending it's something else. What's your name? He asks. Nell, Your Majesty. Eleanor, says one of the men behind him, helpfully, in the tone of a man who's been briefed on everyone in the theatre as a matter of course. Nell, you repeat. Eleanor is the name people use when they want something from me. He looks at you for a moment. The whole box looks at you. The woman in the back with the measuring eyes is very still. Then Charles smiles. And it's not the public smile, the performance of warmth. It's the other one, the one that reaches his eyes and seems to have nothing to do with being watched. Nell, he says, you take your leave. Back down to the pit with a basket. You sell the rest of your oranges in the next 30 minutes, which is faster than usual, partly because the show has started and partly because of the particular energy that follows you down from the royal box, the awareness that something just happened, the way a charge stays in the air after lightning. The play starts. You watch from the side of the pit. The stage blazes with candles. Mrs. Corey is brilliant tonight, the audience in the palm of her hand. The scenery rolls in and out on its frames. The music is quick and bright. You watch the royal box from the corner of your eye. Charles watches the stage, but twice in 2 hours his eyes come down to the pit and find you, each time without any apparent searching, as if he knew exactly where you were. 2 weeks later you're invited to dine with the king. This is not an uncommon occurrence for actresses. Charles II makes no secret of his preferences, and the court has made its peace with the fact that the king is not a man who keeps his inclinations private. He has had mistresses since before the Restoration. He will have them after. The court has developed, over time, the particular flexibility of people who understand that certain arrangements are simply the conditions of their employment. The invitation comes through a man named Chiffinch, William Chiffinch, backstairs keeper to the king, which is a title that sounds modest and isn't. Chiffinch controls access to the king's private apartments through the back stairs at Whitehall that bypass the formal staterooms and all the ceremony they require. He's a small, neat man with the quality of a good lock, precise, reliable, and completely impenetrable if you don't have the right key. He finds you at the theatre on a Tuesday morning while you're rehearsing a part in the Indian Emperor, and he delivers his message in the murmur of someone who's been delivering sensitive messages for 30 years and has never once been overheard. You thank him. You tell him you'll come. You walk back to the stage and finish your rehearsal with Mrs. Corey glaring at you from the wings, and the director, Mr. Hart, watching you with an expression that might be pride or might be worry or might be some complicated mixture of the two, because Charles Hart has been your protector for 2 years, and the invitation from Chiffinch means something for his position that you're both old enough to understand. You're 18, he is 45. That is not the strange part. In Covent Garden in 1668, that is not even the unusual part. The unusual part is that he taught you half of what you know about the stage, about how to hold your body so the audience sees you even when you're not speaking, about how to find the truth in a line of verse that isn't actually very true at all. He's the best thing that happened to you after learning to read. He says nothing about Chiffinch. You say nothing about it either. But that night, when you go back to the room you've kept in Drury Lane since you started earning enough to rent it, you sit on the edge of your bed and look at the coin that Chiffinch pressed into your hand along with his message, not payment but signal, the equivalent of a calling card, and you think about what is being offered and what it will cost and what it might eventually return. You're not naive. You were not naive at 14 when you started at the theatre, and 4 years of watching men and learning how they move has made you less naive, not more. You understand that the King of England inviting you to dinner means several things, and the thing it most directly means is that you are being considered, assessed, and if the assessment is favourable, offered a particular arrangement that has particular terms, most of which are unspoken, and some of which are never spoken at all. What it means for your life after, that depends on how good you are at it, on whether you are a girl who takes what's offered and accepts what's given, or whether you are something else. Whether you are, in short, the kind of woman who can walk into the king's box uninvited and leave with his full attention. You flip the coin, it catches the candlelight, it falls, you go to Whitehall Palace. You've walked past it, obviously. Everyone in London has walked past it. It sits on the north bank of the Thames between Westminster and the city proper, and it takes up so much space that walking past it is unavoidable if you want to get anywhere west of Temple Bar. From the outside, from King Street or from the riverside, it presents itself as a collection of buildings that accumulated over 2 centuries without any particular plan, which is exactly what it is. There are gates and courts and courtyards and towers and wings added by different kings for different reasons, and the whole thing has a slightly chaotic quality, like a very expensive argument that nobody ever finished. But from the inside, Chiffinch brings you in through the back, through a gate on the riverside, through a door in a wall that you wouldn't necessarily know was a door unless someone told you. This is the point. The back stairs at Whitehall are how the king conducts his private life while his public life continues in the staterooms. 2 simultaneous existences. One for the court to see and manage and write reports about. One that happens in the spaces between. The stairs themselves are narrow and unimpressive, stone and plaster with a faint smell of damp coming up from below. You can hear, distantly, the river. You can feel it too, that particular chill that comes off moving water and gets into the walls of anything built too close to it. Chiffinch leads you up without comment. He has done this many times. His silence is professional. The corridor at the top of the stairs is different, wider. The walls are panelled in dark wood and the floor is polished, and there are paintings hung at intervals, portraits of people you don't immediately recognise in frames that cost more than most houses. The air smells of beeswax and something else, something heavier, an overlay of perfume and tobacco and the faintly sweet smell of wood fires burning in rooms you can't see. It's warm. The whole corridor is warmer than any room you've ever been in. This, you realise, is what money feels like as a physical sensation. This particular warmth, the absence of the chill. Chiffinch knocks at a door, opens it, nods at you to go in. The room is not what you expected. You were expecting something formal, some version of the public rooms you've caught glimpses of from outside when the gates are open. All gilded ceilings and enormous tapestries and the kind of furniture that announces itself. This is different. A sitting room. comfortable. A fire in the grate, a table with food on it, 2 places set. Books stacked on a side table that someone has clearly been reading recently, not arranged for display. Dogs, 2 large spaniels, one asleep on the hearthrug and one who looks up when you come in and makes a decision about you with its eyes. The dog appears to approve. It puts its head back down. Charles is already there, standing by the fire, and he's dressed differently than the theatre. Less formal. A long coat, yes, but not the full court ensemble, not the wig and the jewels and the complete architecture of kingship. He looks for a moment like a man who has recently taken off something heavy. "You came," he says. "I said I would." People say they will, and then they don't. All the time. "I don't see the point of saying something you don't mean." He gestures at the table. "You sit." He sits across from you. A servant you didn't see coming in appears and fills glasses with wine, good wine. You can tell from the colour and the smell, and you drink some and register that you were right, and try not to let it show that this is the best wine you've ever had. He watches you taste it. "Well?" "Good," you say. "Good. It's from the estate of a man who owed me something. He paid in wine. I thought it was fair." "That seems like a good deal for him." He thought so too. He still thinks so, but I intend to call in the rest of the debt eventually. I just haven't decided what form it should take. This is the first thing you understand about Charles II that you file away as actually important. He keeps a very careful ledger, not of money, of everything else. Favours, obligations, slights, loyalties. He runs the social world of England the way a very good merchant runs a business, with a precise awareness of who owes what to whom and a long-term view about when to collect. It's not calculation in the cold sense. He's genuinely warm. But underneath the warmth, there is this mechanism, quiet and accurate, always running. You eat. He talks. He's a very good talker, which is not always true of people who talk a great deal, but Charles has the quality of making a conversation feel like it's going somewhere, even when it's apparently going nowhere in particular. He asks you about the theatre, not in the polite way, the performance of interest, but actually with the specific knowledge of a man who's been going to the theatre since before you were born and who has opinions about it. He knows the plays, he knows the actors, he knows the machinery and the mechanics of the stage, the painted scenery and the trapdoors and the particular conventions of Restoration comedy that the audience reads like a shared language. You talk to him like a person. This seems obvious. It might not be obvious to everyone who ends up in this room, in this chair, across this table from this man. For some of them, he is only the king, an abstraction in a wig, and everything they say is addressed to the abstraction and calibrated for the role. You have grown up among people for whom abstraction was a luxury, and calibration meant something practical. Am I going to eat today? Is this man going to be violent? Is this a situation I need to get out of, or one I can stay in? Your sense of other people is raw and direct, and it tells you things about the person across from you that courtesy might miss. What it tells you about Charles is this. He is genuinely, actually lonely in a way that being surrounded by people all the time doesn't help and may make worse. So you talk to him, not performing charm, not angling for something, just talking the way you'd talk to someone you've met who is interesting, which he is. He's funny, genuinely funny. Not the king is funny and everyone laughs kind, but actually quick and self-aware and capable of laughing at himself, which in someone with his power is either a miracle or a very sophisticated act. You decide it's both. You're there for 3 hours. Then Chiffinch appears at the door, which is the signal. You stand. The dogs wake up. Charles stands too, which he doesn't have to do, and walks you to the door and says, at the last minute, as if he's just thought of it, "Come again." It's not a question. When? You ask. He tells you. You go back through the back stairs with Chiffinch, down the damp, narrow corridor, out through the gate in the wall, and you stand for a moment on the riverside in the cold March air, with the Thames moving dark and fast in front of you, and the smell of the city all around, the coal smoke and the mud and the orange smell still faintly on your hands, and you think, all right then, all right. Something has shifted. You can feel it the way you feel a change in the weather. Not certain, not complete, but real. A pressure in the air that wasn't there before. You go back to Drury Lane. You sleep. You dream about nothing you remember in the morning. You go back to Whitehall the following Tuesday. By the summer of 1668, you're no longer an orange girl. This happens gradually and then suddenly, the way most large changes happen. First there are gifts, a gown, jewels, modest at first, then less modest, a better room, then a house, a small one, in the shadow of Whitehall's enormous mass, where you live with a servant girl and a cat and the particular knowledge that everything in your life has been reorganized around a centre that isn't yours to control. Then there are no more early mornings at the theatre cutting oranges. Then there are fewer performances, and then none. You miss the stage. This surprises you. You thought you'd miss the money and the independence, the sense of earning your own way through the world with your voice and your wits, and you do miss those things. But the missing that catches you off guard in quiet moments is simpler than that. You miss the physical experience of it, the weight of the lights on your face, the moment before you speak when the audience doesn't know yet what you're about to do. The feeling of a crowd holding its breath and you being the reason. Power has its own version of that. You're learning that. But it takes longer to learn. In the meantime, you're navigating a world that has rules you were never taught, because the people who know them assumed you'd never need to. The court of Charles II in 1668 is not a single place or a single thing. It's a system, an ecology, maybe. Everything in it is alive and competing for the same resources, which are essentially time, attention, and proximity. The closer you are to the king, the more of all three things you have. The more of all three things you have, the more you can dispense to other people. And the more you dispense to other people, the more they owe you. And the more they owe you, the more you can get done. And the more you can get done, the more the king trusts that you are worth having close. This is not a logic that anyone explains to you. You work it out yourself the way you worked out the oranges. You watch, you notice, you file things away. What you notice first is the other women. Barbara Villiers is the most important of them. The Duchess of Cleveland. She has been the king's mistress since before the Restoration, which means she has seniority, which at court means something real. She has also given him 5 children, which means something else. She's 31 years old, and she is the most beautiful woman at court in the particular way that Restoration beauty works. Full-figured, dark-eyed, with the kind of presence that fills a room before she speaks. She is also, you quickly understand, ferocious. Not in a theatrical way. In the way of someone who has spent a decade accumulating leverage at the highest level of English society and has no intention of letting any of it go without a fight. She looks at you the first time you encounter her in a corridor at Whitehall, and her expression is a very precise measurement. She is calculating. Not what you're worth exactly, but what you cost. What you will cost her specifically, whether you are a temporary problem or a structural one. You look back at her with the same directness you've been using your whole life. The Covent Garden directness that isn't aggression, but isn't submission either. The level look of someone who has grown up among people who don't have the luxury of pretending. She gives you a very small nod. You give her one back. That is the entirety of your first conversation with the Duchess of Cleveland. Later, you will know each other much better, and the relationship will be complicated, and there will be moments of something approaching respect and moments of something approaching war. But on that first day in the corridor, the nod is enough. You have both registered that you are real. Louise de Querouaille is different. She arrives in 1670, brought over from France as an attendant to Charles's sister Henriette. And when Henriette dies suddenly in June of that year, Louise stays. She is everything you're not. French, Catholic, aristocratic, with the careful beauty of someone who has been trained since childhood to be decorative, and the political intelligence of someone who's been working for the French government since she was old enough to understand what that means. She's working for Louis XIV. This is not a secret exactly, but it is the kind of not a secret that people pretend they don't know in order to keep the arrangements working. Louis XIV wants Charles II to do things for France. Louise de Querouaille is his mechanism for making that happen. She's expensive, delicate, endlessly refined, and she cries beautifully. She has the crying down to an art. You've seen lesser performers. You do not hate Louise. That would require underestimating her, and you have learned not to underestimate people who are very good at their work, even if the work is something you do differently. What you feel about Louise is something more like watchfulness, the awareness that she is operating on behalf of interests that are not England's interests, and that this matters. You say this to Charles once directly. You're in bed, the two of you, the fire dying down, and the dog's asleep on the floor, and he is in the half-awake state he gets to sometimes when the day has been long enough. A kind of peace that he doesn't seem to find anywhere else, and you say, Louise is going to push you toward something for Louis, and you should know what you're being pushed toward before you get there. He opens one eye. You think I don't know that, he says. I think you know it. I'm not sure you always care enough to stop it. Both eyes open. He looks at the ceiling for a moment. Then he says, She makes me feel like Europe. You think about this. And what do I make you feel like? He turns his head and looks at you. England, he says, loudly. This becomes, without anyone deciding it should, your political position. You are the English one, the Protestant one, the one who came from Covent Garden, sold oranges, and is not, whatever else might be said about her, in anyone else's employ. When the exclusion crisis comes, when Parliament tries to prevent the Catholic James from inheriting the throne, when the streets fill with men who are afraid of popery and the burning of London and the ghost of what England almost became under Queen Mary 100 years before, your religion is worth more than your title, and you don't have a title, but that's later. First, there is the learning. There is the learning of what the bedroom actually is. Not the physical room, though that too. The bedroom at Whitehall, the King's private sleeping chamber, is a space that operates entirely differently from every other room in the palace. The state rooms, the great hall, the galleries, the banqueting rooms, all of that is public. All of that is England performing itself at itself. Men making speeches and presenting petitions and arguing precedents, and all the theatre of power that power requires to maintain itself. The bedroom is different. In the bedroom things get done. This is not an accident. Charles understands, with the certainty of a man who has been a king since he was 12 years old, even when he had no kingdom to rule, that the formal machinery of government is useful but slow. Parliament debates. Ministers argue. The Privy Council meets. Documents are written and countersigned and filed and occasionally acted upon. This takes time, and in the meantime, there are things that need to happen that can't wait for Parliament, or won't survive Parliament, or that Parliament would actively prevent if it knew they were being considered. The bedroom is where these things are decided, not always explicitly. Sometimes it's not a decision at all, more like a direction established, a preference expressed, a name mentioned at the right moment. The king does not sit in his nightgown signing documents. It's subtler than that. It's the question asked casually over supper about how a particular minister is performing. It's the name dropped, almost in passing, of a man who might be good for this position or that one. It's the small expression of doubt about a policy that everyone in the morning will hear about as the king's developing concern. You learn this because you're in the room, because you watch. The men come. They come through Chiffinch, mostly through the back stairs, the ones who need something they can't get through the front door. Sometimes they come to you, not to the king, because they have worked out that talking to you is an efficient way of getting a word into a conversation that will happen in this room, and a word in the right conversation at the right moment can do what months of formal petition cannot. The first time a man comes to you with money, you stare at him for a long moment. He's a merchant, not a small one. His clothes are good quality, his manner is confident, but the confidence has a particular quality of anxiety in it. The way confident people get when they want something they can't simply buy outright. He wants something to do with a license, an import license for a particular commodity from a particular place. There is a man in the right ministry who is blocking it, for reasons that are probably personal rather than principled, and the merchant has run out of legitimate channels. He puts a purse on the table in front of you. You look at the purse. You look at him. "I'm not sure what you think I can do," you say. "I think you can mention a name," he says, "if the occasion arises, which I understand it frequently does." You pick up the purse. It's heavier than you expected. You put it back down. "Tell me about the import license," you say. "Tell me why it matters. The actual reason, not the business reason." He blinks. He was not expecting this. But he tells you. And it does matter. There are men in Bristol whose livelihoods depend on this trade, workers in a supply chain that reaches from a port in the Levant to a workshop in the west of England. And one obstinate official in a ministry is strangling it because he has a cousin in the same business and doesn't want the competition. You listen to all of it. You take the purse. You tell him you'll see what can be done. You make no promise. 3 weeks later you mention, in the kind of conversation that happens in the half-dark when people are relaxed and honest, that you've heard there's a problem with some licenses in such and such a ministry, that it seems to be obstructing trade that could be quite valuable, that you've been told the obstruction is personal rather than principled. Charles listens. He asks a question or two. He doesn't say anything definitive. The following month, the official in question is moved to a different position. The license is issued, the trade flows. You don't tell the merchant what happened. You don't need to. He hears about the license, he understands. He sends you a gift, a very good clock, which you keep on the mantelpiece of your Whitehall house, and which ticks very quietly and accurately for years. This is how it works. Not corruption exactly. Or not only corruption. Something more complicated. Information flowing to places it wouldn't otherwise reach. Obstructions noticed. Unnecessary friction removed. Sometimes the wrong people benefit and sometimes the right people do, and you have to be honest with yourself about the difficulty of knowing the difference. But here is the thing you learn, the thing that surprises you most. You are good at it. Not because you're cynical, because you're not. You came from Covent Garden with the knowledge of how ordinary people live, which is knowledge that most of the men in those staterooms don't have and wouldn't know how to use if they did. When someone tells you about a licence obstruction that's strangling workers in Bristol, you know what that means in the actual human sense, in the sense of a family and a meal and a child with shoes or without shoes. You are not abstract about it, and this makes you a better judge of what matters. Charles knows this. He doesn't say it explicitly, but you can feel it in the way he listens when you talk. He has been surrounded since birth by people who explain the world to him in terms of policy and precedent and the mechanics of state. You explain it to him in terms of people. What does it feel like, he asks you once, to have come from where you came from and be here? You think about it genuinely, not performing an answer. Like wearing the wrong shoes, you say eventually. They're good shoes, expensive shoes, but they were just for someone else's feet, and after a while everything aches in a specific way. He's quiet for a moment. Yes, he says, that's it exactly. It's the most personal thing he's ever said to you. You understand without having to be told that this moment is real and rare, and that the man who said it trusts you in a way that doesn't require demonstration. You don't mention it again. Some things are worth more unexamined. But let's talk about the room itself, the physical room, because the room matters. The King's bedchamber at Whitehall in 1668 is on the first floor on the south side of the palace, overlooking the Privy Garden with its neat beds and clipped hedges and the Thames beyond. In winter the garden is brown and angular, the hedges dark and geometric against the grey sky, and the river is a moving pewter ribbon visible above the garden wall. In summer the whole view opens up, the garden in bloom, the river glittering, and on warm evenings the smell comes up through the windows, cut grass and river water, and the distant coal smoke of the city. The room itself is large by any normal standard, and crowded by palace standards with the furniture and accumulated objects of a man who has lived in many places and kept things from all of them. There is a bed that is genuinely magnificent, one of those royal beds that look like small buildings, with carved posts and a canopy and curtains of heavy silk, that when drawn create a kind of separate room within the room. There are chairs and tables and chests. There are the spaniels, always, at least two of them, a breed Charles prefers so specifically that they will eventually be named after him, King Charles Spaniels, gentle and silky, and convinced that any horizontal surface is for lying on. There are the paintings. Portrait after portrait, some of them faces you know and some you don't. His mother, his father. And looking at his father's portrait in this room is a strange experience because you know the story. You know what happened to his father in 1649, and looking at the painted face of Charles I above the fireplace, and then at the living face of Charles II in the chair by the window, you can see both the resemblance and the careful distance. The way a face can love someone and also be afraid of what that person means. There are maps. Charles loves maps. He has them rolled in cases and spread on tables and pinned to boards, maps of England and of Europe and of the world, the coastlines of places so remote that the cartographers have filled them in with sea monsters because they didn't know what else to put. He knows these maps. He has touched all of them. He can tell you, from a map of the Mediterranean, the names of harbours he has never been to, and the distances between them, and the depth of water at the entrance bar. He was in exile for 11 years. He learned navigation from a Dutch admiral on a ship in the English Channel in the winter of 1651, running from the army that had just killed his father and was now trying to kill him. He was 21. The cold on that ship was a cold he has mentioned more than once. Not in complaint, but in the specific way that people mention things that marked them. The wind off the channel in November, the spray on your face, the way the cold gets into your hands so that ropes become difficult and you stop being a king and become just a body, trying to function in conditions designed to make bodies fail. He survived. He sailed. He learned to navigate. He has been navigating ever since. The morning begins the same way every morning, and you learn this schedule quickly because the schedule is not yours to set. The king rises. The ceremony of it, the levee, the formal getting out of bed with its audience of nobles and officials, all waiting to hand him his coat or his wig or the items of the morning routine, is performed in the outer room. You're not in the outer room for this. This is one of the things you learn early. There are rooms you are in and rooms you are not in, and the distinction matters enormously and needs to be understood precisely. The king rises, he dresses, he exercises, something he takes seriously. A daily walk through the privy garden with his dogs, a fast walk, not a stroll. He is tall and he moves quickly, and the courtiers who try to keep up with him on these walks have been known to arrive back at the palace slightly out of breath. Then the morning's business, the papers, the ministers, the endless flow of documents that the governance of England requires, Parliament when it sits, Council when it meets. You see him in the afternoons, sometimes in the evenings, sometimes at night. The time he gives you is not official time, not scheduled in any document. It happens through Chiffinch, and through the back stairs, and through the particular silence of people who know what is happening and have collectively agreed not to discuss it in official terms. This invisibility is its own form of power. Because you are not officially there, you cannot officially be stopped. You cannot officially be petitioned against or argued with or presented to Parliament as an expense. You exist in the palace the way the furniture exists, present, useful, not subject to debate. But everyone knows you're there. The court watches you the way a compass watches north. Where are you today? What is your mood? Is he with her this evening or not? The answers to these questions matter because they are indicators, small reliable signals about where the centre of gravity lies. Lady Arlington stops you in a gallery one afternoon to tell you that you're looking very well. She says it with the particular warmth of a woman who has been at court long enough to know that warmth is a tool with many applications. You thank her warmly in return and file away the fact that she is currently trying to advance someone's interest in the king's favour and wants to know if you might be persuaded to help. Lord Arlington himself, who is the Secretary of State and one of the most powerful men in England, acknowledges you with a bow one morning in a corridor that is very slightly too deep for the level of official recognition you warrant. You read the message in it. He knows what you are, he knows what you can do, and he is establishing, in the language of bows and corridors, that he considers you worth acknowledging. You're 20 years old. You have a house near Whitehall, 2 servants, more gowns than you can wear, and a social position that has no name in the official hierarchy, but that everyone at court can locate exactly. This is what you've become. And the question, the one that keeps you awake on the nights you're not at Whitehall, is what you're going to do with it. There is a garden behind your house, small, mostly paved, with 2 beds of herbs and a single tree that produces in autumn, small sour apples that aren't really worth eating, but that you find yourself looking at throughout the season, as they grow from tight green buds to yellow-brown fruit. Your servant girl makes them into a kind of paste with sugar that tastes better than the apples have any right to produce. You sit in this garden on the warm mornings of 1669, a year into all of this, with a cup of chocolate, which is a new thing, a fashionable thing, a drink that arrived from the Americas by way of Spain, and is now available at chocolate houses in the city for those willing to pay. It is slightly bitter and slightly sweet, and the warmth of it goes through you like sunlight through a window. You are reading. You have been reading more than you used to, partly because you have time and partly because you have access to books now that you didn't before. Charles lends them to you. His library is enormous, accumulated over years, and he lends with the ease of a man who reads books to have read them and wants to talk about them afterward. You are reading a history of Rome. You are reading it because someone mentioned the Roman concept of the concubine, the woman who lived with a powerful man outside the legal structure of marriage, who occupied a defined position and a specific space, and who was, in the right circumstances, capable of considerable influence. You are reading it because you want to understand the mechanics, because you have always wanted to understand the mechanics of things before you commit to them. The mechanics, as far as Rome goes, are not that different from here. The woman who is not the wife has always had 2 possible strategies. The first, be decorative, be available, be grateful, and accept that the position is temporary and the exit will come eventually in one form or another. This is the strategy of women who understand their situation as essentially powerless and are trying to minimize harm. The second, accept the position for what it is, which is a window, a view into a room that most people never see, and use that view. Not for yourself necessarily, though also for yourself, for the things that actually matter, for the people who need someone inside that room. You decided, sometime in the autumn of 1668, which strategy you were using. You didn't announce this decision. You didn't even quite articulate it to yourself in these terms, but you made it. You have been making lists, not written down. You're careful about what you write down because written things exist after the conversation, after the moment, and can be used in ways you didn't intend. But in your head you keep a running account of things. People who asked for help and got it. People who asked for help and couldn't be helped. And why? Men who treated you with respect and men who didn't, and what the difference was, and what it indicated about them. Things Charles mentioned that seemed to matter, seemed to cost him something to mention, that weren't part of the public discourse of his court. You keep a list, careful and unwritten, of the things he actually cares about, versus the things he has been told he should care about. They are not always the same list. He cares about the Navy. Genuinely. He spent time on ships and he understands the sea in a physical way that his ministers often don't, and the Navy is England's essential edge in a world where England is an island and the sea is both its moat and its highway. He cares about science. The Royal Society, founded a few years before your arrival at court, is something he takes a specific pride in. The idea that England can be a place where knowledge is built systematically, where a man can make observations and publish them, and have other men test them and improve them, This excites him in the way that power for its own sake doesn't. He cares about religious tolerance in a way that makes his court nervous. He grew up among Catholics in France and among Protestants in the Dutch Republic and among Anglicans at home. And what he has taken from all of that is not a settled conviction about who is right, but a bone-deep weariness of religious killing. He watched his father's war. He has no appetite for another one. He doesn't always act on these things. He is also a king, which means he is also a politician, which means the gap between what he cares about and what he does is frequently occupied by things he's been persuaded to do, or forced to do, or is doing because the alternative is worse. He is not, whatever else he is, naive about what his position costs him, but these are the real things. And knowing the real things is the beginning of being useful. You mentioned the Royal Society to him one evening, with the casualness of someone who's just been reading about it. His face changes. The public face, the relaxed, pleasant face of a man at ease stays roughly the same, but something behind it quickens. He talks for 20 minutes about experiments, about a pendulum clock and the problem of longitude, and a man named Robert Hooke, who is apparently a genius of such thorny temperament that getting useful work out of him requires specific management. About the possibility, which some of the fellows are exploring, that the blood of two animals of different species might be transferred between them, and what this might mean for medicine. You listen to all of it. You ask a question when you have one, and your questions are real questions, the kind that make him work to answer, rather than the kind that just let him keep talking. When he finishes, he looks at you with the expression you've learned to recognize, the slightly surprised one, the one that means he forgot for a moment that he was talking to a girl from Covent Garden, and then remembered and found the combination more interesting than either fact alone. You should come to a meeting, he says. They'd eat you alive, but you'd enjoy it. Women aren't admitted to the Royal Society, you say. No. A pause. I'll have someone write up the observations afterward and send them to you. He does. For months, a scholar named Thomas sends you written summaries of Royal Society meetings. You read them with the particular concentration you've been giving to the Rome book, the concentration of someone learning a language, not the words, but the grammar underneath the words, the way ideas are built and tested and revised. Somewhere in all of that, without making a speech about it or presenting a petition or doing anything that can be named officially, you become the kind of woman who understands what the serious men of England are thinking about. Not all of it. Enough. Let me tell you about a day in 1670 that started in the kitchen and ended in a room where England nearly changed direction entirely. The kitchen of your Whitehall house is in the basement, a low-ceilinged room with a flagstone floor and a fireplace large enough to roast an ox in, and a smell of every meal ever cooked here, layered into the walls like paint, fat and smoke and herb and stock. Your cook, a woman named Margaret, who came with the house and stayed because you were too inexperienced to replace her, and then stayed because she is genuinely excellent, is at the fire before you come down, her face red from the heat, turning something in a pan with the professional efficiency of a woman who has been doing this since she was 8 years old. You eat in the kitchen on mornings when there are no guests and no obligations, which is more often than the court would probably expect. The kitchen is warm. Margaret makes very good bread. These are two qualities that your early life taught you to value at an appropriate level. There was a man, Margaret says, without turning from the fire, early, asking for you. What kind of man? The kind that doesn't want to be seen asking. She turns now, hands you a cup of tea. Not coffee, not chocolate. Tea. A new taste. Still exotic enough to be expensive, but Margaret has a source, and you have told her that this particular luxury is permitted. I told him to come back at a reasonable hour. The man comes back at 9. He's not a merchant this time. He's something else, more angular, with the watchfulness of a person who operates in spaces where being watched costs you. He works for one of the men on the Privy Council, not directly, but adjacent, a kind of information conduit who keeps a careful record of what various parties want and who might want to give it to them. He has information about a treaty, the Treaty of Dover. You may not know that name in 1670. You will hear it eventually. It's one of those arrangements that gets done in the quiet rooms, signed by a small number of people, and then kept away from Parliament, and away from the public, and away from most of the court, because if the full contents were known, the full contents would cause a crisis. Charles is negotiating secretly with Louis XIV of France. The terms include a subsidy, money paid by France to England, which Charles desperately needs because Parliament controls the money, and Parliament is increasingly difficult, and the kind of foreign policy Charles wants to pursue requires resources Parliament won't provide. In return, England will enter any future French war against the Dutch, and additionally, in a clause that is so explosive, it will be kept from even the English negotiators for another decade. Charles has agreed to declare himself Catholic when the time is right, in exchange for the money, in exchange for French troops if the conversion causes the civil unrest that it probably would. The man in your kitchen this morning knows a version of this. Not the full treaty, he doesn't have that, but enough of the shape of it to know that something large is being decided, and that the consequences of it going wrong would be catastrophic. He's telling you because he has worked out with the accuracy of someone who does this kind of calculation professionally, that you are the person closest to the king who is not invested in this treaty going forward, and who might be persuaded to be concerned about it. You let him finish. You ask 3 questions. You give him nothing in return, no commitment, no acknowledgement of what you're going to do with this. He leaves. You sit in the kitchen with the tea going cold in your hands and think about what you know. The Catholic clause. Charles declaring himself Catholic would not merely cause civil unrest. It would remind England of everything it has spent the last century trying to forget. The executions under Bloody Mary, the Armada, the Gunpowder Plot, the wars. England's Protestantism is not a theological position at this point in its history. It is a national identity, the thing that separates England from Spain and France and the Pope and all the forces that want to dominate it. A king declaring for Rome would be existential, and Charles knows this. Charles knows English history as well as anyone alive and better than most. He knows what the Catholic clause would mean, and yet he's signing the treaty because he needs the money, because Louis is offering a lifeline, because Parliament is impossible, and the Navy needs maintenance and the court needs funding, and Charles II, for all his brilliance, is chronically, structurally short of money in a way that shapes every decision he makes. The private finances of the English crown in 1670 are a disaster, a fact that Parliament created by design, understanding that financial dependence is the most reliable form of political control. You think about this for the rest of the morning. You think about the strategy of someone who has to make a deal that he knows is dangerous because the alternative is worse. You think about what it costs to know that and make the deal anyway. You think about what you would do. That evening at Whitehall you are careful. You do not raise the treaty. You do not mention Louis or the Dutch or anything that might indicate you have been talking to someone who talks to someone who knows. You talk about a play you saw last week. You talk about the garden in spring. You talk about the small, ordinary things that make a conversation in a room after a long day feel like a rest rather than a continuation of the work. But at the end of the evening, when the fire is low and the dogs are asleep and the city is quiet outside the windows, you ask very quietly, "Are you all right?" He's silent for a moment. The particular silence of a person who's been asked a question they didn't know they were waiting for. "Not always," he says. "Not tonight particularly. You don't ask about the treaty. You don't push. You just stay." Sometimes that is the thing. Not the information gathered or the name whispered or the policy shaped, but simply being the person who stays when the rest of the court has gone home and the public face can come off, and the man underneath it is allowed for 1 hour to not be entirely all right. This too is power, the quietest kind, the kind nobody puts in their reports. London from above is something that needs to be seen to be understood, and you first see it properly in the autumn of 1670, from the roof of a house in the Strand owned by a court official who is renovating the top floor, and who, when he mentions this to you in passing, finds you surprising him by asking if you can come up. It requires a ladder and a narrow hatch, and a moment of genuine indignity that you accept without comment, and then you are standing on the leads, the flat roof between the chimneys, in the cold October air, with London spreading out around you in every direction. It is always bigger than you think it is, even living in it. Even knowing it the way you know it now, the specific geography of its streets and the distances between its neighbourhoods, the time it takes to walk from Whitehall to the theatre to Covent Garden and back again. From up here, all of that collapses into a single simultaneous view, and what you see is the sheer scale of it. The mass. The roof lines stretching east and west and north beyond, where you can clearly see, fading into the coal smoke that hangs over everything like a permanent low cloud. The silver thread of the Thames to the south, wider than it looks from street level, the ships in the river from up here looking smaller than toys. The dome of St. Paul's, the new one, still being built 6 years after the Great Fire destroyed the old one, Wren's work, already rising above the surrounding buildings like a statement about what England intends to be. The Great Fire was 4 years ago, 1666. It burned for 4 days. You were 16, and you watched it from the roof of a building near Covent Garden with your mother and half the neighbourhood. All of you watching the city burn in a silence that wasn't exactly silence, because there was the noise of the fire itself, which is not one noise but many. The roar and crackle and the occasional catastrophic crash of a roof coming in, and the noise of the people watching, a crowd 10,000 strong and growing, all of them with the same expression, which is the expression of people who are watching something irreversible happen and have not yet worked out how to begin thinking about what comes after. 13,000 houses, burned, 87 churches, the old St. Paul's with its medieval tower, the entire commercial heart of the city, the warehouses and halls and wharves. They started rebuilding immediately, within weeks. That is the thing about London that you find yourself returning to, the sheer refusal of it. 13,000 houses gone, and within a year new streets were being laid out, new houses going up, new plans. Christopher Wren presented a plan for a completely new city, a rational city with broad straight streets laid out on a grid. Parliament looked at it and rejected it. Not because it was a bad plan, but because London doesn't work that way. London works from the ground up, each person building what they need where they need it, and the accumulated result is chaos. and also, somehow, alive in a way that planned cities aren't. From up here you can see both the scar and the rebuilding. The areas that were burned and are now new. Brick mostly, because the building codes after the fire required brick instead of the timber frames that burned so easily. The areas to the west that escaped, that are still timber and plaster, that look older and more cramped. The church towers rising here and there, some of them still wren's work in progress, their scaffolded spires visible above the rooftops, and the people. From up here they're invisible, or nearly. Tiny movements on tiny streets, smoke rising from hundreds of chimneys, a barge moving on the river below, too small to see clearly. The city as organism, breathing, moving, consuming and producing. You've been in London for 6 years. You know it as a street-level thing, as smell and sound and the specific weight of the cobbles under your feet when you're tired. You know which streets are dangerous and which are safe and which are both depending on the hour. You know the theatre and the court and the back stairs at Whitehall and the kitchen in your house, and the particular quality of light in the privy garden on a summer morning. But you have never seen it like this before. All at once, all of it. It makes you feel something that is hard to name. Not quite small, not quite large, something in between. Like you are part of something so much bigger than you that your individual existence barely registers in it. And this is terrifying and also, somehow, exactly right. You are a girl from a Covent Garden back street, from a lodging house that smelled of river mud and gin, and you're standing on a roof watching the greatest city in the world spread itself out in the October light, and you are part of it, woven into it, and the city doesn't care who you are, but you are here, and that is something. "What are you looking at?" asks the man who owns the house, who has climbed up after you with considerably less grace. "Everything," you say. He looks at the view. He's been to this roof 100 times and stopped seeing it the way people stop seeing anything that's always there. He looks for a moment with fresh eyes. "Yes," he says. "It is something, isn't it? You stay up there until the cold gets through your coat and your fingers stop working properly and the light starts to go amber in the west. Then you climb back down through the hatch and stand in the unfinished room with plastered dust on your shoes and your hands still cold from the wind and the shape of the city still in your eyes. All of it. The whole impossible, brilliant, filthy, magnificent thing. The court masque at Whitehall in January 1671 is the kind of event that costs more than your mother's lodging house was worth in its entire existence. And watching it, you find yourself doing a kind of calculation that you never used to do and now can't stop. The masque is performed in the banqueting house. Inigo Jones's building finished in 1622, the ceiling painted by Rubens with the apotheosis of James I. The room where, on a cold January morning in 1649, Charles I walked through a window cut for the purpose and put his head on a block outside. This room, these ceilings, the same room where the current king's father died is now hung with candles and draped with silk and filled with the finest people in England, watching entertainment that cost more than most of them will spend on anything else this year. The smell in the banqueting house at full capacity is something that takes a moment to adjust to. 200 people, dressed in silk and wool and linen, most of them having bathed recently by the standards of 1671, which means somewhat recently, and all of them wearing perfume of varying quality and ambition. The perfume is imported from France, mostly from the south, from the flower fields of grass where people spend their lives processing roses and jasmine and lavender into small expensive bottles, Add to that the beeswax of the candles, the warm wax smell of 100 flames burning close together, and the accumulated wood smoke that lives in the walls and the hangings of any building this old, and the particular human warmth of a crowd in winter, and you get the banqueting house in January 1671. Magnificent and slightly overwhelming, like standing inside a very beautiful fire. You're dressed in something that cost more than everything you owned for the first 17 years of your life. A gown of deep blue silk with a petticoat embroidered in silver thread. Your hair dressed high with pearls. The pearls are real. This is still a thing you notice, that the pearls are real, because real pearls versus glass is a distinction that mattered very much once and that you haven't entirely stopped making, even though it's been years since the glass ones. The Masque is about Britannia, because it is always about Britannia, or about something that represents England in the mode of classical allegory, the mythological shorthand through which the court talks to itself about itself. Britannia rises from the sea. Neptune comes to do her honour. There are nymphs. There is music. There is machinery that makes people and set pieces fly, that makes waves appear on the stage floor, that makes a whole island appear from nowhere to gasps from the assembled company. It is technically magnificent. You find yourself thinking about the cost, the silk for the costumes, yards and yards of it, at prices that reflect the scarcity of good imported fabric, the machinery, timber and rope and winches and the skilled carpenters who built it, the musicians, 40 of them, the best available, the candles, burning all evening, hundreds of them, the thick beeswax kind that give a clean light rather than the tallow kind that gutter and smell, the food afterward, a supper laid in the adjacent rooms, dishes of such elaborateness that they require multiple hours of preparation and a kitchen staff of 30 to execute. The masque costs approximately £8,000. You have not looked at this specific account, but you know enough about court expenses now to make an educated estimate, and £8,000 is close. £8,000 would house every family on the street where you grew up for 3 years. Properly house them, with coal and food and a roof that didn't leak. You're not saying the masque should not happen. You're not making a political argument about money. You're simply noting that you can see both things at once now, and that this double vision is something you developed in Covent Garden, and can't switch off even in the banqueting house, with the Rubens ceiling above you and the blue silk on your back. Charles is on his throne, raised on a dais at one end of the room, watching the masque with the expression he gets at entertainments he's seen variations of before, polite and actually slightly bored, though he will never show the bored part fully because there are people who worked very hard on this and he knows it. Louise de Kerwisle is beside him in cream silk, looking like a painting of a French noblewoman, which she is. She has acquired the title Duchess of Portsmouth now. She has a house. She has furnished it at the king's expense in a way that caused comment in Parliament. She smiles at the masque with her careful smile. You're to one side, in the company of some of the less senior ladies, in the position that reflects your exact position at court. Present, acknowledged, not central. This is correct. You have learned not to require centrality. Centrality is visible, and visibility is dangerous, and dangerous is the last thing you want to be when things are going well. Barbara, the Duchess of Cleveland, is not here tonight. She has gone to France, a semi-voluntary removal that reflects the fact that her relationship with the king has cooled into something more like mutual respect and occasional negotiation. She will come back eventually. These things cycle. After the masque, the supper, You move through the room in the way you've learned, the way that is confident without being aggressive, that puts you in the right conversations at the right time without seeming to place yourself there. Lord Shaftesbury, who is going to be important in ways that nobody has quite worked out yet, speaks to you briefly about something that doesn't sound important and is. You file it. A man from the Dutch embassy hovers at the edge of your awareness, wanting to speak to you but not willing to do so openly, and you let him hover without resolving it, because you want to know what he wants before you give him an opportunity to ask. The Duchess of York, future Queen of England if her husband inherits, watches you from across the room with an expression that you have learned to read correctly. She doesn't dislike you. She's measuring the power dynamics, as everyone in this room is always measuring the power dynamics, and she has correctly identified that you are part of them in a way that matters. You eat something, some confection of sugar and almond paste shaped into a swan, because it's there, and because you're hungry, and because one of the things you've held on to from Covent Garden is the practical knowledge that you should eat when there is food. The swan tastes of pure sweetness, nothing else. The kind of thing that has no function except pleasure. You think about the orange fields in Spain, the sugar plantations somewhere across the ocean, the chain of labour that produced this small sweet bird for you to eat in 30 seconds without thinking about it. Then you stop thinking about it and finish eating and get back to work. The Popish plot breaks in 1678, like a storm that everyone could see coming and nobody quite believed would arrive. A man named Titus Oates presents himself before the Privy Council in September of that year with a story, a Catholic conspiracy, planned assassinations, a plot to kill the king, put his Catholic brother James on the throne, restore England to Rome. The details are elaborate and specific, names and dates and places, the kind of detail that feels like evidence even when it isn't, and Oates delivers it all with the confident clarity of a liar who has rehearsed. The thing is, there is no plot. Titus Oates is a fantasist and an opportunist who has constructed an elaborate fiction from the raw material of England's deepest fear, which is Catholicism, which is everything England spent the previous century fighting, which is the Armada and the Inquisition and the massacre of St. Bartholomew, and the burning of Protestants under Mary Tudor, all of which are technically history, and all of which live in England's memory with the vividness of things that happened last week. The thing is also, people believe him. Not everyone, not at first, but enough people in enough important positions to turn the fantasy into a fact. The Privy Council, confronted with the specific names Oates has provided, does what bodies do when they are afraid. They investigate. An investigation, in 1678, quickly looks like proof, because the Catholics who are being investigated are terrified, and their terror looks like guilt, and their silence looks like conspiracy, and before anyone has established whether any of this is real, men are in the Tower of London. The Earl of Danby, the Lord Treasurer, who has been managing the complex business of keeping England's finances from catastrophe, falls. Not because he's Catholic, he isn't, but because he's associated with the government, and the government is associated with all of this. The exclusion crisis, which has been building for years, the question of whether Catholic James should be allowed to inherit the throne, suddenly has rocket fuel under it. Parliament reconvenes. The streets of London are full of a particular energy, the energy of a crowd that has been afraid of something for a long time and has finally been given permission to express it. The pamphleteers are at work, the printers' presses running day and night, pamphlets about Catholic conspiracies and French influence, and the whore of Babylon appearing in every shop window and being read aloud in every coffee house. Some of those pamphlets mention you. not by name exactly, by implication. The king's mistresses, the French Catholic influence in the bedroom, the Duchess of Portsmouth and all her satellites. You are part of this imagery. You are one of the symbols of the corruption they are talking about. Except you're not French and you're not Catholic. You are, as you will famously say in this period, though the exact wording gets changed in every retelling, the Protestant whore. This is not a comfortable thing to call yourself, but it's accurate, and accuracy is useful, and in a city where the choice is between Protestant and Catholic, and everything else is secondary, being Protestant matters, being visibly, undeniably, unarguably Protestant, in a way that everyone in London knows, because everyone in London knows where you came from. This matters. You go to church. You've always gone to church, but in 1678 you go with a deliberateness that isn't exactly a political statement, and everyone reads as one. St. Martin in the Fields, the church nearest Whitehall, which is as established as Anglican gets. You sit in a pew. You hear the service in English. You're seen hearing it in English. The crowd outside the church one Sunday is bigger than usual. There are men on the edges of it who are there for politics rather than religion, who want to see who comes and who goes and what that tells them about the allegiances of people who matter. You come out of the church in your best coat, which is blue, which is Protestant in the symbolic language of 1678, and you give the crowd the full benefit of your face, which is the face of a woman who is not embarrassed about where she is or afraid of being seen there. Someone cheers, not for you specifically probably, but in the direction of the church and what it represents, the Protestant church, the English church, the thing that is under threat. You walk back to your house with your servant girl and your bodyguard, because you have a bodyguard now, and you feel something you haven't felt since the theatre, the particular electricity of a crowd paying attention to you, the awareness that you are readable, that people are reading you, and what they're reading is something useful. At court, the atmosphere is different, tighter. The easy warmth of the 1660s, the theatre and the masks and the general sense that everything was going to be fine now, because the king was back and the good times were here, that is gone. The men who come through Whitehall's corridors move faster and speak more quietly, and watch each other with a calculation that has sharpened past politeness. Charles is under extraordinary pressure. Parliament wants James excluded from the succession. A significant portion of the court wants the same thing. Shaftesbury, who has become the centre of the exclusionist faction, is running the political opposition with the skill and ruthlessness of a man who has decided that this is the thing, that this is where his legacy gets made or broken. Charles does not want to exclude James, not because he approves of his brother's religion exactly, but because excluding James from the succession would establish the principle that Parliament can determine who inherits the throne, and if Parliament can determine that, then the monarchy is no longer a monarchy in any meaningful sense. It is an institution that Parliament permits, and permits conditionally, and those conditions can always be changed. Charles is not going to let that happen. You agree with him. You tell him so, directly, one evening when he's been sitting in silence for 20 minutes with a glass of wine untouched, and the particular look of a man who's making a decision that costs him. You know I'm not Catholic and I'm not James's advocate, you say. But if they exclude him, they're not excluding a person. They're establishing a power that breaks everything. Yes, he says. He picks up the glass. Yes, that's exactly it. Then you already know what you have to do. A long pause. I know it and I hate it, he says. I've spent 15 years trying to avoid another civil war. And now I have to do the thing most likely to bring one. which is tell Parliament no. You watch him. He's 50 years old now, and the years are on him in a specific way. The way they are on men who have carried something heavy for a very long time. Not weakness, not collapse, but the particular weight of endurance. You've survived worse, you say. He gives you a look that is so unguarded it takes you a moment to read it. It is, very simply, gratitude. Not performed, not political, just real. I have, he says, relatively speaking. He dissolves Parliament 3 times during the exclusion crisis. He calls and dissolves and calls and dissolves, manoeuvring, buying time, using the French subsidy that nobody in Parliament knows about to survive financially without needing to beg for supply. He is at his best in these years, you think, with absolute clarity of judgment, not because it's comfortable or safe or strategically obvious, because it isn't. Because he is making the right call in the right direction for the right reasons, while a significant portion of his kingdom is convinced he's making the wrong one. In 1681, he calls Parliament to Oxford, away from London where the London mob is a factor. He meets them there, he listens to the Bill of Exclusion, he has it in his hand, he takes it to an antechamber, and then he dissolves Parliament again. For the last time, he never calls it again. He governs without Parliament for the last 4 years of his life, on the French subsidy, on what he can squeeze from other sources, managing a kind of financial tightrope that everyone knows can't last indefinitely, but that he makes last long enough. England does not have a civil war. James inherits. 3 years later, James loses his throne to William of Orange. Peacefully, with barely any blood, the glorious revolution, the constitutional settlement that puts Parliament properly in charge and makes the king a managed institution within a parliamentary system, all of which comes after Charles. But the thing that prevented it from being catastrophic, the thing that made the transition possible rather than catastrophic, was Charles holding the line in 1681, dissolving Parliament, not giving ground, being for 4 years the thing he always said he didn't want to be, a king who rules alone. You are with him the night he dissolves Parliament in Oxford. You don't know at the time what it will mean. You just know he comes back from the antechamber with the look of a man who has put something down that he was tired of carrying, and he says simply, "Done." And you say, "Well, what are you going to do now?" He looks at you, and for a moment he looks younger than he has in years. "Go home," he says, "and sleep." It is, at that moment, precisely the right thing to say. There are smaller things. Let me tell you some of the smaller things, because the big events are not actually where most of this life happens. There is a Thursday afternoon in 1675 when you spend 3 hours with a lawyer trying to secure a pension for a former soldier from the wars who has been waiting for 7 years for a payment that was promised him in writing by a ministry that no longer exists. The lawyer explains, with the patient tone of a man who has made this explanation many times, that the dissolution of the ministry voided the obligation, and that while the promise was certainly made in good faith, it was made by an entity that no longer has legal standing, and therefore you listen to the entire explanation. You ask where in the document the pension obligation was written. He shows you. You ask who the current inheritor of the ministry's functions is. He tells you. You ask whether that body has formally disclaimed the obligations of its predecessor. He is quiet for a moment. "No," he says, "they have not." Then, you say, the obligation stands. He tells you it is not that simple. You tell him to find the man who made this simpler for 2 weeks and get back to you with something more useful. Then, it is not that simple. He gets back to you in 10 days with paperwork. The soldier gets his pension. You add this to the unwritten ledger, not as a favour, not as something owed, as something that needed doing. The soldier is 43 years old with a leg that doesn't work properly from a wound taken at the Battle of the Medway, which was, a bad day for England, the Dutch sailing up the river and burning ships at anchor, while the English navy, underfunded and undermanned, tried to defend itself. The Dutch did that because England was, at the time, insufficiently committed to maintaining its navy at proper strength, which is the kind of thing you understand better now that you know the accounts. There is a Saturday morning in 1672 when you are in the kitchen, with Margaret making something, or rather Margaret is making something, and you're in the kitchen because the kitchen is warm, and because Margaret is good company, in the particular way that people who focus entirely on their work are good company. The warmth of competence in the room, the smell of whatever is in the pot, the sound of the fire and the knife on the board. Margaret tells you about her cousin. Her cousin is a girl of 15 who has been put into service in a house in Cheapside, a merchant's house. Good people as far as anyone knows, but the merchant's son has been at the girl. Margaret doesn't say this directly. She says it the way women say things to each other when they're not sure if the person they're telling will take it seriously. You take it seriously. You make a visit to the household in Cheapside a week later. You don't announce yourself. You arrive at the house in the morning in a manner that reflects your standing, which is high enough that the door is opened quickly. You speak to the merchant's wife. You suggest with the pleasantness of a person who is being very pleasant, and both parties know what the pleasantness is covering, that the arrangement with Margaret's cousin might no longer suit, and that you happen to be looking for a reliable girl for your own household. Margaret's cousin comes to work for you the following week. The merchant's son, you learn later, goes to sea. His father arranged it quietly. Getting your son out of London quickly when someone with court connections takes an interest in his behaviour is, in 1672, the sensible move. You pay Margaret's cousin fair wages. This is not complicated. It is the thing that needed doing. There is a winter afternoon in 1677 when your son is ill. You have a son, Charles Beauclerk, born in 1670. He is 7 years old and he has the cold that goes around every winter, the cough and the fever and the pale face that makes children look like miniature old people. And he is in bed in the house on Pall Mall that you've moved to, the larger house, because there's a child now and a child needs space and a garden and a room of his own. He is not critically ill. Children get fevers in winter. Most of them survive. But he is small and he is hot and he wants you in the room and you are in the room. You read to him, the same way your mother taught you to read, out loud, the book between you, the words becoming air. He likes history already, this child of yours, the accounts of battles and explorations and the lives of people long dead. He likes maps. He has his father's quality of attention, the ability to fix on something and stay with it while the world moves around him. The fever breaks toward evening. He falls asleep properly. You sit beside him for a while longer with the candle burning low, watching him sleep, listening to his breathing steady and slow. His name is Beauclerk because Charles gave him a surname and a title. Duke of St. Albans eventually, an acknowledged child. This is more than many women in your position can say. Not a legitimate heir, not someone who will inherit the throne, but a person with a name and a place in the world, which is the thing your mother was not able to give you, and which you have arranged to give him. The question of his future, of all your futures, is not settled. It has not been settled since you walked up those back stairs in 1668. It is the permanent condition of this life, the not settledness, the awareness that everything you have is contingent on the man who gave it to you, and on his continued health, and his continued affection, and on the entirely unpredictable path of events. You have been thinking about this for years. You have not done the thing that some women in your position have done, which is to borrow against the future, to accumulate debts in the expectation that the king's favour will last long enough to cover them. You've been, as far as possible, careful. You have property, you have savings, more than most people would expect from someone who grew up in Covent Garden with a drinking mother and 3 rooms to a family. You have a son with a title and a pension from the crown. If it all ends, you will not starve. This is the most you can do. It is not enough, and it has to be. You blow out the candle. The room goes dark except for the coals in the fireplace. Your son breathes. Outside, London carries on with its endless, loud, particular life. You are 32 years old. You are, by any measure that would have made sense to your 14-year-old self, inconceivably far from where you started. And you are still the girl from the back street in Covent Garden. You are both of these things simultaneously. You're always going to be both of these things simultaneously. That is fine. You made peace with the double existence years ago. It is, when you think about it, not unlike the king's situation. 2 simultaneous lives, one performed in public and one that happens in the spaces between. You have more in common with Charles than either of you has probably ever said out loud. But your son is breathing properly, and his fever has broken, and the fire is warm. And for this moment, in this specific moment, that is enough. The king's health changes slowly and then faster. In the early 1680s, Charles is 50-something, and the life is on him. The decade of exile and the 2 decades of court life since. The pace of it. The drinking, which has never been excessive but has been consistent. The rich food, the late nights, the weight of a reign that was never simple and got substantially less simple from 1678 onward. He tires more easily. He moves through the palace with the same presence, but something has gone out of it slightly. The quick energy of the man who used to outpace his courtiers on the morning walk. He talks about mortality with a matter-of-factness that disturbs some people around him. He is not afraid of it exactly. He is a man who has had a lot of practice with things he can't control, and has developed the equanimity about them that practice produces, but he thinks about it. He talks about what he hopes England will look like after. He talks about James in a way that's complicated, love and worry woven together, the love of a brother and the worry of a king who knows what James is like and what England is like, and that those 2 things are going to collide badly. In February of 1685 he has a stroke. It's sudden. He is with his courtiers in the morning, in the ordinary morning routine of the bedchamber, and then he is not where he was, and the doctors are there, and Chiffinch is sending word, and the palace shifts in the way buildings shift. When the thing they were built around changes, a subtle structural change that everyone can feel, but nobody can immediately name. You hear within the hour. You're not allowed into the official rooms. This is the rule. This is the thing about your position, the other side of the invisibility. The limitation built into the same structure that protects you. The back stairs are not available now because the back stairs are guarded now. Because everything is guarded. Because the mechanics of succession and ceremony and the management of a king's death are all in motion, and they follow their own rules. You sit in your house on Pall Mall. You've been here before, in the general sense. You have spent 17 years in proximity to power, and you know what it feels like when power changes hands. You know the smell of it, the particular quality of the silence in the corridors when something large is happening. You know the way people's faces change, the small recalculations that run behind their eyes as they process what is new and what it means for them. But you have not been here in the specific sense. You have not been here with Charles. He lingers for 4 days. There are doctors. There are the treatments of 1685, which are frankly worse than the disease and include bleeding and purging, and things that, from the vantage of any later century, look like a very determined effort to kill a sick man faster. He bears all of it with the stoicism of a man who has been through worse, though it's unclear if that's true or if it's just the only face left. On the 4th day, there is a priest, a Catholic priest. Charles II dies in the Catholic faith, received into the church in those final hours, the secret of the Dover Treaty given its private completion. He converts at the end quietly in the bedchamber with his brother James and a small number of witnesses. This is not announced. It leaks eventually the way things leak, and it becomes part of the complicated legacy, the thing that either confirms everything his enemies said or reveals, depending on who you ask, the real belief underneath the performed Anglicanism. You don't know about the priest until after. You find out the way you find out most things, through the network of people who know things and tell you, because telling you is useful to them, or because they genuinely think you need to know. When you hear it, you are quiet for a long time. Then you think, he always said he was the most tolerant man in England about religion. Maybe he meant it. Maybe what he meant was, at the end he got to be what he actually was, and what he actually was is more complicated than what anyone wanted. This seems to you extremely possible. He is 54 years old, considering everything, considering exile and restoration and the fire and the plague and the Dutch wars and the exclusion crisis and the 17 years of running a country on a French subsidy that Parliament didn't know about. 54 seems both too young and somehow appropriate. He packed a great deal in. You sit in the Pall Mall house for a week after. The court reorganises itself around James. The machinery continues. England continues. Fires burn in 10,000 hearths. Ships move on the Thames. Somewhere in Covent Garden, girls are cutting oranges and selling them in the theatre, with the quick calculating attention of people who understand that the orange is never just the orange. You grieve privately, which is the only way you're permitted to grieve, which is also the way you prefer. Then you get up and make arrangements for your son, for the properties, for the future, as it currently appears from here. And now, this moment, this room. Your house on Pall Mall, March 1685, 3 weeks after the funeral, the spring just starting to suggest itself in the quality of the light. You're sitting by the window. The room is warm. The fire behind you in the grate has been burning since morning, coal packed tight, throwing a steady heat that you feel as a pressure against your back and your shoulders. The window is cold. These two temperatures meet somewhere around your ribs in a way that is not unpleasant. The contrast of them, the reminder that outside and inside exist as different things. Outside, Pall Mall moves with its usual afternoon pace. A carriage going west, its wheels loud on the paving. 2 men walking quickly in conversation, their breath visible in the cold air. A woman with a basket of laundry. A boy running for reasons boys run that adults have stopped trying to track. The elm trees at the edge of the park are bare still, the branches dark against the grey sky, but there is something in them, some readiness, a quality of the bark and the bud ends that says, give it 3 more weeks. You have been in London for 21 years. You know it springs by now. The chocolate in your hands has gone slightly cold. You drink it anyway. Margaret makes it strong and with a good deal more sugar than fashionable, which is how you've always wanted it. And after all these years, she simply does it this way without asking. It is one of the things you did not know you would value about a life. The people who know how you like your chocolate. Your son is in the other room. He is 14 now, Charles Beauclerk, Duke of St Albans in the title that his father gave him, and that James has confirmed, because James is many things, and the things he is include a man who honours his brother's promises. Your son is reading, probably. He reads the way you read, with his whole body, pulled in, the book becoming the only thing in the room. He will be fine. You've been making sure of this for 14 years and you're not done yet, but the foundation is there. The title, the pension, the education, the capacity inherited from God knows where but real, to be in a room and read it correctly. He will be fine. You have been thinking in these 3 weeks about what it means to look back on something and recognize it as complete. Not finished in the sense of ended because you're 35 years old and you're not done with anything yet, but complete in the sense of having had its full shape revealed. The 17 years at Whitehall. From orange girl to whatever it is you are, whatever word there is for the thing you've been, you were never the wife. You never had the title, the formal position, the legal standing. This is not the life you would have written for yourself from the outside, but from the inside. From the inside, you were in the room. You were in the room when the decisions were made and the things were decided and the direction of England was discussed in the quiet hours. You were in the room for 17 years, and you were there as yourself, not as a performance of what someone wanted, not as a function of what someone needed, but as the person who came in with the orange and stayed, because you were genuinely interesting to be with, and because you were genuinely useful, and because you could look at the most powerful man in England and talk to him like a person. That is not nothing. In a century where women have approximately no formal power of any kind, that is not nothing. You think about the soldier who got his pension, the cousin of Margaret's who got out of the Cheapside house, the licence that unblocked the trade from Bristol, the 100 small things that went through your hands and came out the other side in better shape than they went in, not because you were making them into a record, because they were in front of you, and you could do something, and you did. You think about the night in Oxford, when Charles came back from dissolving Parliament and said, "Done," and slept for once without the quality of wakefulness that his sleep always had, the king's sleep, the half-ready quality of someone who is always on some level listening for trouble. He slept that night, really slept. This too is not nothing. The fire shifts behind you. A coal settles with a soft sound. The room is warm. Your chocolate is cold now, really cold, and you put the cup down on the windowsill without drinking the rest. Outside, the elm tree, the bare dark branches against the grey March sky. 3 more weeks, you told yourself. Give it 3 more weeks. You find you are not afraid of the 3 weeks, or of whatever comes after them. You've been negotiating the unpredictable for 21 years with the tools you were born with and the tools you built for yourself, and you have come through it with your son and your house and your health and your mind intact, and the particular dignity of a woman who never, at any point, pretended to be something she wasn't. That is enough. that is more than enough. The light outside shifts as a cloud moves. The cold off the window glass reaches your face. Somewhere down Pall Mall a bell rings, marking an hour. Your son in the other room turns a page. You breathe in, you breathe out. You think about oranges, the smell of them on your hands, the small cuts from the blade, the way the juice ran cold down your wrist in the dark of the Theatre Royal, while the candles were being lit and the audience was arriving, and the whole evening was still in front of you, unknowable and full. You were 14, you were 18, you're 35. Some days are better than others. That has always been true and will go on being true. But you are here, in this warm room, in this city you know, and somewhere down the hall your son is reading, and the spring is 3 weeks away, and the fire is good and steady behind your back. Let that be the thing. Let that be what you carry forward from today. But let me go back. Let me take you back before the reflection and the grey March sky and the 35-year-old woman by the window. Let me take you back to the body of it. The physical fact of living in London in the 1670s, because the facts of it are something that need to be felt, not just described. You wake on a winter morning in 1674. Your house on Pall Mall. The attic is where the servants sleep. The main floor is the kitchen and the sitting room and the small library. The upper floor is your bedroom and the child's bedroom. The rooms arranged around a staircase that creaks on the 3rd and 9th steps, and which you navigate in the dark by feel. The bedroom is cold, really cold. The fire in the grate burned through the night, but the coal runs down toward morning, and what's left by the time you open your eyes is the faint warmth of ash. A warmth you can feel if you put your hand near the grate. But that hasn't made it to where you are, into the air of the room, which has that specific winter indoor cold, the cold that settles in any space where a fire has died, and the walls haven't retained enough heat to compensate. Your breath is visible. You can see it rise above you in small pale clouds, each exhale becoming briefly visible in the cold air and then dissolving. You do not want to get up. This is a universal truth that transcends century. On cold mornings, no one wants to get up. You lie for a moment with the blankets pulled to your chin, registering the cold on your face, the warmth underneath you. The blankets are good blankets, heavy wool, the kind that are too hot in summer and exactly right in winter. And they have been on you all night, so they carry your warmth, the specific warmth of a body that has been still for 8 hours. You get up anyway. The floorboards are cold through your shift. You learn this at the first step and compensate at the second, walking on the balls of your feet, the heels not touching if you can help it. Margaret will be up soon, or is already up. She rises before the household without comment. It is simply the rhythm of her life, and there will be a fire in the kitchen and the water heated for the morning wash. But for right now, in this specific moment before the house wakes, you stand at your bedroom window in your shift with your feet cold on the boards, and you look out at Pall Mall in the thin early morning light. Frost, the paving outside white with it, each stone edged in ice. The elm trees in the park stiff and dark. No one on the street yet, just the absolute quiet of a cold morning before the city decides to begin. In a few hours this street will be full. Carriages and sedan chairs and people going east toward Westminster and west toward the city, and all of it will be noise and smell and the dense continuous movement of 500,000 people conducting their individual lives at close quarters. But right now, in the frostlight of an early February morning in 1674, it is quiet. You stand there for a while, just breathing, just looking. Then Margaret's footsteps below, the kitchen fire being raked to life, and the house begins its day. Wash first. The water in the basin from the night before has a thin skin of ice on it. You break it with your knuckle. The water underneath is very cold. You wash your face and hands and the back of your neck, the cold water making you more awake than you want to be yet, and you dry off on the linen cloth that is rough enough to have some texture and warm from the hour it spent on the hook. Dress. This is always a more complicated operation than it looks from the outside. The layers of it, the shift and the stays and the petticoat and the gown, all of them going on in a specific order that you have done so many times now that your hands know it before your brain engages. The stays are stiff in the morning, the leather and boning having held their shape overnight, and getting them on requires that first awkward moment of persuading them to conform to a body that is still half asleep. You lace them yourself. You've always laced them yourself. A minor independence in a world where dressing required a maid, though Margaret will help if you want her to. The gown is a dark red, a practical colour for a winter morning, one that doesn't show coal dust or kitchen smoke at a glance. The fabric is good wool, heavy and warm, and when you put it on the warmth of it is immediate, a physical comfort. Hair next. Brushed out, which takes time because it is long and thick and the night has done what nights do. You pin it up with the efficiency of someone who does this quickly, because there is always something else to get to. Not the elaborate construction of a court evening, just a practical shape for a morning at home. You look at yourself briefly in the glass. 30 years old. The face your mother gave you, broad-cheeked and dark-eyed. The particular English complexion that goes between pale and weathered depending on the season. Not the fashionable face of the period, which is oval and pale and delicate, the face of women who were born indoors. Yours is the face of someone who sold things outdoors in all weathers for 4 years, and whose childhood was conducted largely in the street. It is a face that looks like it has been used. You have decided over the years that this is fine. Downstairs, the kitchen is the warmest room in the house, and will be all day. The fire in the kitchen range is a different fire from the bedroom grates. Bigger, hotter, maintained continuously through the day and banked only at night. Kept alive with coal that arrives from the wharf 2 streets over in sacks carried by a boy who is 12 and whose name is Robert, and who seems, to your observation, to be doing all right. The coal costs more than it did 10 years ago. Coal costs more than everything did 10 years ago. London is learning that growth has a price, that the expansion of the city and the population requires more of everything, and more of everything costs more. Margaret is at the fire with the morning chocolate, the small pot of it, the particular smell that fills the kitchen. First thing, slightly bitter, slightly sweet, with the deeper smell of the coal fire underneath it, and the bread that she's been baking since 5 o'clock, which is already done and sitting on the table wrapped in cloth. There is a cat. You did not mean to have a cat, but the cat appeared in the garden 3 years ago, and showed no inclination to leave, and now the cat sits by the fire in the kitchen, and watches everything with the confident stillness of an animal that has successfully negotiated its own terms. You eat breakfast in the kitchen, not in the dining room. The dining room is for guests. The kitchen is for mornings, for the honest quiet of a room where things are produced rather than performed. Margaret doesn't talk much in the morning except to tell you things you need to know. A message delivered last night, something that needs attention in the household, the state of the coal supply. You listen and respond and eat your bread and drink your chocolate and watch the cat watch the fire. Your son appears at 7:30. He comes downstairs in his coat because the upper floor is still cold, and he is a child, and children feel cold sharply and quickly. He is dark-haired already, the darkness that came from his father, and he has the height too, the promise of it in his frame, the slightly too long limbs of a boy who will be tall. He sits across from you at the kitchen table and Margaret gives him bread, and he eats it with the seriousness of someone taking care of urgent business. "What are you reading?" you ask. "Clarendon's history," he says, mouthful. He swallows. "The Civil War. Papa recommended it." Papa? Charles. He saw his father once a week, sometimes twice. The visits managed by Chiffinch with the same efficiency as everything else. And those visits were, as far as you can tell, the thing your son values most in the world. Not because they were grand or formal, but because Charles was genuinely interested in him, would talk to him for an hour about ships or science or the history of Rome with the same full attention he gave to his ministers and his mistresses and his spaniels. You are glad of it. It is not something you could have guaranteed, and it is something you value beyond almost everything else about the arrangement. What do you think so far, you ask? Of the Civil War? He considers this with the seriousness that serious questions deserve in this house. You have always taken his questions seriously, and he has always taken yours. "I think," he says carefully, "that both sides thought they were right. And they were both probably right about some things, and the people who got hurt were the ones who were neither. You look at him over your chocolate cup. He is 13 years old. Yes, you say. That's exactly it." He goes back to his bread. The cat gets up and moves to the other side of the kitchen. Margaret turns something in the pan. The fire burns. You think about what it means to raise a child with a clear eye, with the ability to look at a complicated situation and see the competing truths in it, rather than collapsing it into simple sides. You learned this in the theatre and in the back stairs of Whitehall, and in the specific education of being an outsider who watches insiders and sees the mechanism behind the performance. You have given it to him. Whether he needed it from you or inherited it or built it himself from the materials of his particular childhood, he has it. You finish your chocolate. You get up from the table. The day is waiting. Let me tell you about Louise's perfume, because it matters and because it's specific. The Duchess of Portsmouth wears a perfume from Grasse, which is a town in the south of France where the air in spring smells of jasmine and rose, and that smell is apparently worth shipping across a country and a channel in small sealed bottles at enormous expense. The perfume is very good. This is the irritating thing about it. It is genuinely, objectively, the most sophisticated smell you have encountered. The kind of thing that makes you understand why people pay what they pay for it. The layers of it that open and change throughout the day. The way it interacts with warm skin to become something different from what it is in the bottle. You wear English lavender water, it costs significantly less. It smells clean and simple and entirely like itself. No layers, no mystery, just lavender. This is not a deficiency. It is a statement, though you never make it explicitly. The statement is, I am English, I smell English. This is the thing I am, and I am not pretending to be French. Louise knows this. Louise is very intelligent about most things, and this is not a thing she is less intelligent about. She knows what you're doing. You know that she knows. You both proceed anyway, because this is what court life is. An elaborate game of mutual awareness in which everyone knows what everyone is doing and continues to do it because the game is the game. But there are moments between you that are different from the game. Moments that catch you both slightly off guard by being genuine. One afternoon in 1677, you're both in a waiting room at Whitehall, waiting to see the king about separate things, and you end up simply in the same room for 20 minutes with nothing to do but sit and acknowledge the situation. Louise speaks very good English now. She's been here 7 years and she's learned it with the efficiency of someone for whom learning is a professional tool. She speaks it carefully, choosing words, occasionally reaching for a French word when the English one doesn't fit what she means. "You know," she says, after a few minutes of silence, "I didn't choose this." You look at her. "My family presented me to Louis as a possible instrument," she says. "I was 20 years old. One does not say no to Louis." You say nothing. You are listening. "I have thought sometimes," she says, "that you're very lucky to have chosen, to have walked into that box with an orange because you decided to." The word lucky sits between you for a moment. "The orange was the only choice," you say. "Before that, everything that happened to me happened without my permission. The cold house, the drinking mother, the selling of oranges. That wasn't choosing." She considers this. She is very still, Louise. She moves through the world with a physical composure that is genuinely difficult to acquire and that you recognize as something built over years. "No," she says, "you are right. I think we've both worked very hard with very limited materials." This is the most honest thing she has ever said to you. You believe her. The relationship between you never becomes friendship. The political interests are too opposed, and you are both too careful about what you give away. But after that afternoon, there is a different quality to the awareness. Something that might, in a less pressurized context, have been respect. She knows something you know. How much work it is to be what you are, what it costs, what it requires every day, the alertness and the management of yourself and the constant calibration of what to show and what to keep. Women who have done this work recognize each other, even when they are on opposite sides. And then there is the evening you're walking back from the Privy Garden, the summer of 1673, and you pass a servant girl, one of the household servants, 17 maybe, carrying a pile of linen that is too large for her and that she clearly can't see over. She's navigating by memory, feeling her way with her feet, and she takes a corner slightly wrong, and the whole pile begins to shift, and you are the nearest person, and you catch it. The linen, both armloads of it, and the girl's expression when she realizes who caught it, is extraordinary. The cascade of responses across her face, relief, then recognition, then a kind of complete social confusion. Because what do you do when the king's mistress catches your laundry? "All right," you say. "Yes, ma'am. I'm terribly sorry, ma'am." "You couldn't see. It happens." You help her restack the pile, adjusting it so the balance is better. "Hold it lower, against your hip. You can see over it then." She adjusts. You can see immediately that it's better. "Thank you, ma'am," she says, with the expression of someone who's just been given something they didn't expect. You walk on. Behind you, you hear the slight adjusted weight of the pile settling correctly against her hip. This is not a small thing. In a court where a servant girl's failure to navigate a corridor properly might get her reprimanded or dismissed, a small piece of practical help from the right direction can mean you are allowed to stay here. You are allowed to do this work. Someone noticed you in a way that helped rather than harmed. You have been that girl. You know the specific quality of being noticed in the helpful way versus the harmful way. You know it in your body, the difference, the way your whole system responds differently to each. You're in a position now to be the helpful kind of noticing. You try to use it that way. Let me tell you what Whitehall smells like. The full account, not the official version with the beeswax and the French perfume. The palace is built on the riverbank. The Thames at Whitehall is not a romantic river, or not only that. It is the sewer of London, the outlet for everything the city produces that it doesn't want anymore. In summer, the smell from the river comes up through the palace gardens with a quality that Charles, once, described to you as the smell of London's ambitions meeting their natural destination. He was in a particular mood that day, but he wasn't wrong. In the staterooms the smell is managed. Pomanders and fresh flowers and the perpetual effort of the household to make 500 years of accumulated building smell like something other than what it is. But in the corridors, the back corridors, the ones you know from years of using the back stairs, the management breaks down. There is the cold stone smell, the smell of walls that are always slightly damp from the proximity of the river. There is the coal smoke, present everywhere in London but concentrated in a building this size with this many fires. There is the smell of food, always, wafting from kitchens that run continuously. The palace kitchen feeding hundreds of people daily with the organisational complexity of a small army. And there is the smell of people, hundreds of them. The court of Charles II numbers in the hundreds, at full count, all of them living in close quarters in a building that was designed for a different era and hasn't had a proper modernisation since Elizabeth. The washrooms are inadequate. The privies are medieval. The smell is something you stop noticing after a while, the way you stop noticing the smell of anywhere you live long enough, but it is there. The accumulated human smell of a great court, and if you arrive from outside today having been away for a week, it would hit you immediately. This is important to understand. The beautiful silk gowns, the jewels, the painted ceilings, the machinery that makes entire islands appear in masks, all of it existing in the same building where the privies overflow in hot weather, and the rats are an acknowledged feature of the lower floors, and the damp gets into the walls of the north wing every winter and makes the tapestries smell for months. The French court, which sets the standard everyone is trying to compete with, has this same problem. Versailles, which Louis XIV is building right now into the greatest palace in Europe, is magnificent and it smells terrible. Courtiers relieve themselves in the corridors when the commodes are occupied. The fountains and gardens are beautiful, and they are walked through by dogs, and their outputs are not always cleaned up promptly. Power and filth coexist. They always have. The tapestry covers the damp wall. The perfume covers the person who hasn't bathed. The ceremony of the bedchamber covers the fact that it's a bedchamber with all that implies. You've always been clear-eyed about this. Covent Garden taught you that beautiful things and ugly things live at the same address. The orange in your hand cut clean and bright while the floor was covered in sawdust that smelled of last week's crowd. The play beautiful, and the playing space a fire hazard with inadequate sanitation. The king's bedroom magnificent and cold, and containing the accumulated smell of the fireplace and the dogs and the man who slept there. None of this diminishes it, or rather, it's the whole truth of it. The beauty and the filth together are the real thing. The version that is only beautiful is a lie. The version that is only filth is also a lie. The opposite lie of people who want to debunk rather than understand. The truth is both and always both, and anyone who gives you only one of them is editing. The candles burn in the chandeliers and the wax drips onto the floor below and someone has to clean it up, and that person is not in the chandelier. They're on the floor with a cloth and aching knees. This is also true. You know both truths. The chandelier and the cloth on the floor. You always will. There is a night in the summer of 1676 that I want to tell you about, not for any political reason, just because it happened and it was real. You are at Windsor with the court for the summer. Charles takes the court to Windsor in summer partly for the hunting and partly to get away from the London heat and smell, which in August reaches a level that even the banqueting house ceremony can't manage over. Windsor is different. The air is cleaner, or relatively, and the castle sits on a rise above the river and catches the breeze in a way that Whitehall, in its riverside pocket, doesn't. The evenings at Windsor are long and cool after the hot days. The light holds until 9 o'clock. The castle gardens in the evenings are the kind of beautiful that requires no particular artistic appreciation to experience. It just lands on you. The low golden light and the smell of cut grass and roses and the particular stillness of a summer evening when the wind has gone. You're walking in the Long Walk, the great avenue of elms that runs south from the castle, in the company of Charles and 4 or 5 others, a small informal group, the evening walk that follows dinner. The dogs are with you. They always are. The spaniels range through the grass at the verge of the path with the enthusiasm of animals who've been inside all day and are dealing with it by being very busy. The conversation is easy, not about anything important, about a play that someone has seen in London, about a horse that ran well last week, about whether the summer is going to hold or whether the cold will come early. And then Charles stops walking. The others after a beat stop too. You stop. He's looking west along the walk, toward the horizon, where the sun is going down in a particularly extravagant orange and pink that is doing something wonderful to the underside of the clouds, the kind of sunset that you know is beautiful, partly because it is, and partly because the air after a hot day has a particular quality that makes the light refract like that. And you know this because you know things now that you didn't at 14, things about how light works and why. Because you have been reading for years. He stands there for a moment just looking at it. My grandfather hunted here, he says quietly, not really to anyone. And my father before me. And now, me. He's thinking about time, about continuity, about the specific weight of being the person who links all these other people together, who stands in the spot where all those other people stood, who carries the whole accumulated thing forward. You are standing to his left. You say nothing. After a moment he reaches out and takes your hand, just holds it. Not a gesture for anyone, not performed. The company is small enough and informal enough that this is permitted. The others are looking at the sunset or at the dogs or at the sky, and not particularly at you. You hold his hand, the sun goes down, the orange and pink shift to purple and then to the deep blue that come just before dark. The first star appears. The dogs come back, panting, tongues out, satisfied with whatever they investigated in the long grass. Shall we go in? Someone says. Yes, Charles says. He releases your hand. He walks toward the castle. You walk beside him. You're thinking about time too, about the generations behind you that had nothing like this, about the generations ahead that won't know about this particular evening, or the quality of this specific light, about the way a moment exists completely in itself, the way it is real and entire and then gone, and how that doesn't diminish it, how the going doesn't make the being less. The long walk in the summer evening light, the dogs, the hand, real, entire, gone, that was enough. Now let the story settle. Let London settle around you. You're in your house on Pall Mall and the fire is good. The Pall Mall house is the one you'll stay in, the one that is yours properly, the one that is in your name and that no one can take when the arrangement changes, because you were careful and because you asked for it specifically at the right moment, when Charles was in a generous mood and you were in a position to ask without it looking like calculation. The house is warm. The good warmth, the warmth that has been building since morning, the coal fire in the kitchen and the fires in the main rooms, all of them working together so that by evening the walls themselves are warm, not just the air near the grate, but the actual walls, the plaster and the brick behind it holding the heat. Your son is in his room, asleep probably, or reading in bed, which is where he does his best reading, a candle on the stand beside him and the blankets up around his chin. He is 14. He is fine. He's going to be fine. Margaret has gone to bed. The kitchen is quiet now, the fire banked for the night, not extinguished, but low, maintained at the level that keeps it alive until morning without consuming too much coal. You have learned to bank fires correctly. This is one of the practical knowledges you gained early and never lost. The house around you is full of the sounds of a house at night. Timber settling, the creak of a board somewhere above, a faint sound of Pall Mall outside, the last carriages, a voice somewhere, then nothing. London at night is never completely silent. Something in it always moves. A watchman on his round, calling the hour. A dog. A light in a window across the street. Someone else still awake. Someone else with a candle and a thought they're working through. This city of 500,000 people is always, somewhere, awake. But it gets quieter. It always gets quieter. You sit by your bedroom window with the candle on the sill beside you, not reading, just sitting. The cold of the glass is there if you put your hand near it, a cold that comes through the lead-glazed panes that are good panes, substantial, double thick, a quality item that the previous tenant spent money on for reasons that were probably not about comfort, but about the status of good windows, which in 1685 is still very much a status item. Good windows. You have them. Your mother didn't. The list of things you have that your mother didn't. It's long enough now that you've stopped thinking about it as a comparison. It's just your life. The chocolate and the good wool coat and the house in the right street and the son with the title. Your life. Not borrowed. Not temporary. Though all of it depends on time and chance and the willingness of subsequent kings to honour what the previous one established. James will. He will. He was careful about this. But there is still that. The not quite settledness. The awareness that a life built this way, in the spaces between official structures, without a document with a seal on it, is a life built on human goodwill and human memory. And human goodwill is not permanent and human memory is short. You have done what you can with this knowledge. You've been careful. You've saved rather than spent. You've built the reputation of being reliable, trustworthy, not someone who sells what she knows or weaponizes what she's seen. People at court trust you, various people over various years, with things they wouldn't trust most of the other inhabitants of that world with. This is valuable. This is the kind of thing that outlasts any single arrangement. You breathe out slowly. The candle flame is very still. No draught in this room tonight, the windows properly sealed, the door closed, the fire in the grate settled into its low-burning night mode. A steady red glow with very little flicker. The candle just burns straight up. The light it produces warm and small and entirely sufficient for sitting by a window with your thoughts. You close your eye. The sounds of the house, the sounds of London, the sound of your own breathing, which you can hear when it's this quiet, the small particular rhythm of it, in and out. You're 35 years old. You have lived more life than most people alive in England right now. Not more years, more density, more range, more height and depth of experience. Orange girl and actress and mistress and mother and the unofficial person in a room where England's direction was discussed for 17 years. This is not a small thing. This is several different kinds of life packed into one, and it is not over. You're 35. The spring is 3 weeks away. Your son is reading history in the next room. The fire is good. The house is yours. Begin to let it go. The day, the thinking about the day, the thinking about what you said and what you should have said and what tomorrow requires, begin to let it go. It will still be there in the morning. These things are always there in the morning. Right now there is only the warm room and the quiet house and the sound of London settling into its own dark hours. Breathe in. The smell of the coal fire, low now but still there, the particular warmth of it. The faint smell of Margaret's bread from this morning, which is a comfortable smell, a domestic smell, the smell of a house where people are fed. The faint cold smell of the window glass where the outside world presses against the inside. Breathe out. Let your hands relax. They're probably tight, probably carrying the small tensions of the day in them. The hands remember things the mind releases, and you have been using your hands all day, holding the chocolate cup, turning pages, adjusting your coat when you went out for an hour, the small gestures of a life conducted with the body as well as the mind. Let them go. The muscles of your face, the muscles around your eyes that have been paying attention since you opened them this morning, the muscles of your jaw that hold your thoughts in place, the slight tension that you carry when you're thinking, when you're managing, when you're in any room with any person and the management is running even when you think it isn't. Let all of that go. The room is warm enough. The house is safe enough. Your son is breathing steadily in the next room. The fire will hold until morning. You are warm enough, safe enough, still enough. You are allowed to rest. The boundary between thinking and not thinking is the thing that sleep asks you to cross, and tonight it is not hard. You have been crossing it every night for 35 years. Your body knows the way. The fire makes a small sound, a coal settling, a tiny shift in the red light of the grate that you notice with your closed eyes as a change in the warmth on your face, slight, barely there. The fire is not concerned with you. It is doing what fire does, consuming the fuel that has been given to it and producing warmth and light as a consequence. The same trade it has made in a million hearths in a million rooms, since the first person who was cold sat down in front of the first fire and understood that something outside them could make the cold bearable. You're not the first person to sit in front of a fire at the end of a long day and let the warmth hold them. You won't be the last. Outside, London is doing what London does at this hour. The night watchman on his round somewhere nearby, his lantern moving through the dark streets. The river running south toward the sea with the Thames's particular determination. The current that doesn't stop because the hour changes or the season changes or the politics change. The river just moves. It moved when the Romans built their town on its bank. It moved when the Vikings sailed up it. It moved when William came from Normandy and everything changed. It will move long after the things you've known are gone, the Theatre Royal. You wonder sometimes if it still smells the same, the sawdust and the tallow and the breath of crowds. Probably it does. Some smells are structural. Some places hold on to what they've been. You think about the weight of an orange in your hand. not in a sad way. Just because the memory is physical, and physical memories are the ones that last. The weight of it. The slight give of the peel when you pressed. The smell when the blade went through. The released citrus sharp and bright. The smell that for one moment cuts through everything else. Cuts through the sawdust and the tallow and the coal smoke and the mud and the river, and is just orange, clean and particular and entirely itself. 14 years old, cold in the pit, basket on your arm, the whole evening still in front of you. That girl didn't know anything about what was coming. She knew the immediate things. Make the quota, clear the basket, don't let the bruised ones go unsold. She knew how to smile at the right moment and hold the orange at the right angle to catch the candlelight. She knew the mechanics of the transaction and the name of everyone in the pit who was worth knowing. She didn't know about Chiffinch and the back stairs. She didn't know about the room with the maps and the spaniels and the man who laughed at an orange being held up as a business proposition. She didn't know about the view from the roof of the Strand House, all of London in the October light. She didn't know about the boy who had come 14 years later with Charles's height and his own particular seriousness, reading Clarendon's history in bed. She didn't know any of it. She just knew. Hold the orange at the right angle to catch the light. Smile at the right moment. Keep moving. That was enough to start. The candle on the windowsill is burning very low. The wax has pooled in the base. The flame small now, guttering slightly even in the still air. Soon it will go out. The light in the room is already mostly the red gold of the fire grate. The light that is all warmth and softness. The light that has no edge in it, that makes rooms feel like rooms rather than spaces. When the candle goes out, the darkness will be the good kind, the kind that holds things safely, the kind that says, for now, you are allowed not to be watching, not to be reading, not to be listening for what comes next. For now, the room keeps you, and that is all that's required. Breathe in, breathe out. The city goes quiet around you, or not quiet. The city never goes quiet, but it goes softer. The particular register of London at 2 a.m, the rhythm of it slower, less urgent, the sounds further apart, the silences between them longer and more restful. Think of the elm trees in the park. Not this March, but another one, earlier, from years ago. The same trees but younger, less certain of their height, the branches in early spring just beginning to feel the warmth that will eventually bring the leaves, the readiness in them, the slow gathering of what they need before the burst of it, weeks of cold and then suddenly, overnight almost, the green. You've always liked that. The suddenness of the spring after the holding. You are holding now. Everything is held. The house and the sun and the spring that's coming and the years still in front of you. Held in the dark room with the fire going low and the candle nearly out. You don't need to count anything. You don't need to plan anything. You don't need to be anything right now, tonight, except warm and breathing and here. Warm enough, breathing, here. That is the whole requirement of sleep. That is what it asks. Just be here and let the day go. Be here and let the here hold you. You are not in Covent Garden. You are not in the theatre. You are not in Whitehall, not in the Privy Garden, not on the rooftop in October, not in the long walk at Windsor with the sunset and the dogs and the hand in your hand. You are here. In your room, in your house, in your life. And all those other places are still real. They are still in you. They don't leave. They become the shape of you. The places you have been and carry with you, and they are there when you close your eyes, present in the way that all good things are present, not sharp, not demanding, just warmly, reliably there. The orange smell, the cold water on your face in the morning, the sound of your son turning a page, the fire going low, all of it here, all of it enough. Let me tell you about the day the Duchess of Cleveland came to your house uninvited. It was a Tuesday morning in the autumn of 1672, before you'd moved to Pall Mall, when you were still in the smaller house near the palace. You heard the carriage before you saw it. The specific sound of a very good carriage on cobblestones has a quality that a slightly worse carriage doesn't have. Something in the suspension, in the way the weight distributes, and the Duchess of Cleveland travels only in very good carriages. You were in the garden with your chocolate, the October morning cold but dry, watching the apple tree hold its last 3 fruits, when Margaret came out with the expression of someone who has just opened the door to something she wasn't expecting. "The Duchess, ma'am." You put the cup down. Barbara Villiers came through the house without waiting for invitation, which was her right by seniority if not by any document, and she came into the garden in a coat that cost more than everything in the room behind her, and looked at you with these dark eyes doing their calculation. "I'm going to France," she said. "I'd heard." You'd heard. Something moved across her face. Not quite amusement. "Then you'll know why I'm here." You thought about it. Barbara going to France was not a neutral event. It was a managed exit, negotiated through the court with the particular delicacy of an ending, that both parties need to maintain dignity. She was not being expelled. She was leaving. The distinction mattered enormously to her, and, you understood, to Charles, who was constitutionally unwilling to dismiss people he had genuine feeling for, even when the practical situation required their removal. "You want to know what happens to your position," you said. She was quiet for a moment. The apple tree above her had lost most of its leaves. 3 apples, yellow-brown, hung in the bare branches with the slightly surreal quality of objects that have stayed past their season. "I want to know," she said carefully, "whether you understand what this is, what you've walked into." "Tell me," you said, not challenging, genuinely. She sat down, which surprised you. She sat in the garden chair with the posture of a woman who has spent 12 years learning to inhabit expensive furniture, and looked at the garden with an expression that was, for a moment, quite tired. "I gave him 5 children," she said. 5. I ran his household when he had no proper queen to do it. I managed the court when the court needed managing. I knew every name, every debt, every obligation in that palace when he came back from exile with nothing but the clothes on his back and the assumption that everyone would fall into line." She looked at you. "And now I'm going to France." You waited. "You're going to be very useful to him," she said. "You already are. You have a quality that I never quite had. Some gift for making him forget he's the king, which is apparently what he's wanted all along and never knew how to ask for." A pause. "Use it carefully." "Is that advice or a warning?" She stood up, adjusted her coat. The Barbara Villiers who was a weapon, the one who had been the most formidable woman at the most dangerous court in England for a decade, reassembled herself in about 2 seconds. "Both," she said. "Use it carefully and don't make the mistake of thinking it makes you safe." She walked back through the house. You heard the carriage move. You stood in the garden for a while after, with the cold October air on your face, and the 3 remaining apples in the bare tree and the sound of London going on behind the garden wall. You thought about what she'd said. You thought about it for years, actually. It was the most useful thing anyone at court ever told you. Not because it was a secret, but because it was true. And true things said plainly by someone who knows what they're talking about are rare enough to be valuable regardless of the relationship between the speaker and the listener. Use it carefully. Don't think it makes you safe. Both of those sentences did their work in you over the following years. Both of them shape decisions you didn't know you were making at the time and recognize later as shaped by that morning in October, with the cold air and the apple tree and a woman who had run England herself, in her own way for longer than you had been alive. She was right about all of it. Let me tell you about the Thames in January. Not the river in summer, not the river at high tide with the ships coming in, not the river as highway and commerce and the life of England flowing through it. The river in the cold. January 1684, one of the coldest winters in living memory. The Thames freezes. Not just skim ice at the edges, not just the shallow reaches. The Thames freezes solid, bank to bank, thick enough to walk on, thick enough for carts, thick enough for the frost fair that springs up immediately because London is a city that responds to any unusual event by setting up stalls and charging admission. You go to the frost fair with your son. He is 14, and the Thames frozen is the kind of event that happens once in a generation, and he should see it. The river below the bridge, a quarter-mile of solid grey-white ice, is covered in people. The stalls have sprung up overnight, as they always do. Food sellers, ale sellers, trinket sellers, printers who are setting up presses on the ice to print commemorative broadsides, a man selling cups of something hot and brown that might be coffee and might be tea and might be something else entirely, but is hot, which is the main thing. The cold on the ice is a different cold from street cold. The ice itself radiates it from below, while the winter air comes from above and the river wind comes from the east, and there is nothing, not a building in sight to block any of it. Your face goes numb in minutes. The cold gets through your coat and your thick wool skirt and makes itself felt at every joint, the knees first and then the hips and then the lower back, the places where cold settles in people who are getting older, even if they're not yet old. Your son doesn't notice the cold. He is 14 and he is on ice, and there is a roasting ox somewhere nearby, and a man on skates who has strapped blades to his shoes and is moving across the ice with a speed that seems impossible. He watches the skater with the pure focus of someone witnessing a skill he has immediately decided to acquire. Can I learn that? Yes, you say. How? We'll find someone to teach you. He looks at the skater a moment longer. Then he looks at you with the expression he uses when he's checking something. Not a question about facts, a question about seriousness. You mean it, he says. I mean what I say, you tell him. He grins. He gets the grin from you, you think. Or maybe it's just the grin of someone who's been told yes when they expected negotiation. He goes to watch the skater. You watch him go, weaving through the crowd on the ice with the loose-limbed ease of a boy who moves through the world with his body as a primary tool, not careful, not afraid. You stand there for a moment with the cold coming up through the soles of your shoes from the frozen river, and the noise of the frost fair all around you, and your breath visible in the sharp air, and you think, there will not be another year like this one for a long time. The Thames will not freeze like this again for decades. Future generations will read about this winter in books and try to imagine it. Your son will remember it. He will tell his children about the day he watched a man skate on the Thames. You are part of that. The mother who said yes, the mother who brought him here, the mother who stood on the frozen river in January and let him go off and watch the thing that interested him, and did not call him back to be careful or stay close. You're made of Covent Garden and the Theatre Royal and the back stairs at Whitehall. You're made of Barbara Villiers' warning and Charles's hand in yours at Windsor, and the boy who gets his pension after 7 years. You are made of oranges and Louis de Kerouaile's perfume, and the smell of coal fires and the view from the Strand rooftop in October. And you are made of this. A January day on a frozen river with your son nearby, and the cold coming up through your shoes and your breath in the sharp air. All of it, all at once, all the same person. You breathe out slowly. The breath is visible. It rises and dissolves. The fare is loud around you. And somewhere close, your son is watching a man skate across the Thames with blades on his shoes and the ease of someone who learned this as a child, and now it's simply what his body knows how to do. There is a particular quality to the Whitehall corridors in summer that you learn to navigate the way you navigate everything, by attention. The heat in July is the heat of a building that has too many people in it and not enough windows open. The court doesn't open windows the way ordinary people do, because opening windows means noise from outside and draughts and the smell of the river, and the smell of the Thames in July of 1673 is something that Parliament itself has complained about in official sessions. The river in summer is, to use the precise language of the men who manage the palace sewers, a crisis. The outflow from the city upstream. The waste of the palace itself, which houses hundreds and manages that waste by the traditional method, which is not managing it very carefully and hoping the river takes it. The river takes it and then gives it back at low tide, and the smell settles over Whitehall with a persistence that no amount of French perfume entirely covers. You learn to breathe through your mouth in certain corridors at certain tides. This is one of the practical knowledges that doesn't appear in any account of life at court. You also learn to read the tiles. The corridors at Whitehall are partly flagged in stone and partly tiled, and the condition of the tiles tells you something about the age and history of the different wings, which wings were built when and by whom, and whether the original builder cared about quality or was trying to save money. The old tiles near the Watergate, worn smooth by 300 years of feet, have a particular warmth in summer from the sun that comes through the south windows. You've stood on those specific stones on cold mornings and felt the residual heat of the previous day in them, the way the stone holds what it receives. The newer tiles in the wing added under Charles I are technically better quality but somehow colder. They don't hold warmth. They are efficient and they are beautiful and they are cold in the way that things built for appearance rather than comfort are often cold. You prefer the old worn ones. You prefer, in general, the things that have been used, the silk that has been handled, the chair that has been sat in by generations of people, the corridor floor that knows the shape of feet by now, that has accommodated thousands of passages without ceremony. The things that have been used carry history in their surfaces in a way that new things don't. They have density. They have the particular weight of having mattered to someone before you. You've come to feel this way about your own life, actually. About the quality that accumulated use gives to things. The orange girl with the basket and the cold morning and the blade and the smell of citrus on her hands. The actress learning to hold a stage. The woman on the back stairs. All of that use. All of that density. You carry it. And then there is the afternoon you spent in the city, in the old part. The part that burned in 1666 and was rebuilt in brick. and you walked along the river past the wharves and the warehouses, and watched the unloading of a ship that had come in that morning from somewhere east, from the Levant maybe, or from further, and the men on the wharf were shifting cargo that smelled of spice, of something warm and foreign, a smell that had no English equivalent, that arrived from a place that had different air and different soil and different everything. And the smell of it on a London dock in the grey afternoon was the most striking thing you'd encountered in months. The sudden intrusion of the genuinely elsewhere into the utterly familiar, the world beyond the city reminding you that it exists. You stood there for longer than you had time to stand. The smell of foreign spice on a London dock. The world is very large, you thought. Even from here, even from a city you know as well as your own hands. The world is very large, and most of it is completely outside your experience and always will be. And this is not a loss exactly, but it is true. And the truth of it has a particular quality on afternoons like this. In the grey light, with the foreign smell in the air. You are an English woman in London in the 17th century. You are also, always, a human in a world most of which you will never see. Both of these things are fine. Both of these things are the complete picture. You walk home along the river in the grey afternoon, the smell of the spice fading behind you, as you move north and west toward Whitehall, replaced by the familiar smells of the city, the coal and the mud and the bread from the baker on Cheapside and the horse dung on the road, and all of it. All the layered, complete, familiar smell of the place you have lived in for 20 years, and the familiar smell is its own kind of comfort, its own kind of richness. Home smells like itself, and itself is enough. Let the warmth come all the way in. It's there. It's been there all evening, in the walls of the house, in the air of the room, built up from the fires burning since morning, and the particular way that heat accumulates in a well-kept space, the way warmth becomes ambient, becomes part of the room itself rather than something you notice separately. Let it come all the way in, into your hands, into your feet, into the places where the day's cold still lives, the residual cold of a walk outside, the cold of thinking hard, the cold that sits in your shoulders when something has been worrying you. Let it go. The warmth is not asking anything of you. The warmth is simply what warmth does. It moves toward cold places and settles them. It asks nothing in return. It is the most generous thing in the world, warmth. It doesn't care who you are or where you came from or what you've done or failed to do. It just comes and stays and asks you to be still. Be still. There's nothing in this room that needs managing right now. The fire is doing what fires do. Your son is sleeping. The house is locked, and the street outside is quiet, and the night is being what nights are, the rest between days. The enormous, generous, dark pause between one dawn and the next. The time the world allows for recovery, for the slow repair of all the things that the day uses up. You are allowed to use it. You have always been good at the doing, the noticing, the managing, the reading of rooms and the quick calculations and the lists kept in the mind. You have always been the person who is ready, alert, watching for what needs doing. Right now, nothing needs doing. Right now, you can be the thing that's held, rather than the thing that holds. Close your eyes properly. Not the half-sleep of someone who is still listening, still monitoring, still available for the next thing that might need them. The full closing. The decision to go all the way in. Your breath goes slower on its own. You don't have to make it slow. It does it because that is what breath does when the body is finally allowed to stop managing itself, when the whole system is given permission to do what it does naturally. The long, slow tide of breathing in and breathing out, in and out, the oldest rhythm in the world, the one that started before you were born and will stop only at the very end of everything. Not tonight. Tonight it just moves, in and out, easy. The ribs rise and fall, the belly moves, the breath finds its own pace and settles there. You are going now, not away from anything, just deeper into the warmth of the room and the weight of the bed, and the specific, particular, irreplaceable, ordinary, extraordinary fact of being a body that is tired and warm and safe, that has done its work for today and is being given what it needs. Centuries will pass after this night. London will change beyond anything you could describe to someone living then. The buildings you walk past will crumble and new ones will rise. The streets will be smoothed and lit with light that doesn't require flames. The river will be bridged in a dozen places. The theatres will be rebuilt and rebuilt again. The palace at Whitehall will burn down eventually, as it had to burn down eventually, and something else will rise in its place and in its place and in its place. And England will be something you wouldn't quite recognise, though you would recognise the thing underneath it, the character of the place, the particular English stubbornness, the habit of muddling through. Kings will come and go. James will lose his throne and William will arrive and 100 years will pass and a different kind of revolution will change everything, and 100 more years and everything will change again and again and again. But there will always be a woman in a warm room at the end of a long day. There will always be someone who is tired and warm and safe and putting the day down. There will always be someone hearing the city outside and the fire inside and the breath of a child in the next room and thinking, this is more than enough. This is the whole thing. You're that woman tonight. And somewhere in the long chain of nights before this one there were others. And somewhere in the long chain of nights that will come after, there'll be others still. Some things don't change. The need for rest doesn't change. The warmth of a room and the permission to stop doesn't change. The moment when the day becomes the night and the night takes you doesn't change. Let it take you. Let the pell-mell house go dark around you. Let the fire burn down to nothing. Let the night be what nights are. You have earned this. You have earned every second of this. The last thing you notice is the sound of the city, very far away now. The distant particular hum of London that you have known for 21 years, so familiar it has become interior, become part of the sound of your own thoughts. The city and you indistinguishable from each other, both just here, breathing, going on. And then not even that, just the dark, just the warmth, just the rest. Good night.